Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into one of the sneakiest, most quietly brilliant campaigns in modern history. The decade when American food companies stopped trying to feed you and started trying to engineer you. No swords, no famine, no grand conspiracy in a smoky room. Just orange dust, foil pouches, cartoon tigers, and a cup of soda so large it will not fit in your car. Thank you so much for being here and for turning this into the strange little bedtime ritual it has become. If this channel has ever carried you off before the end of a sentence, tapping the subscribe button helps more sleepy strangers stumble onto it. And if your thumbs still work, tell me which time zone you're quietly dissolving in tonight, plus the one 1980s snack you would, if we're being honest, still absolutely inhale on sight. Now get comfortable, kill the lights, aim the fan somewhere useful, drag the blanket up over one shoulder, maybe grab a snack, ideally one that is not stained, a colour unknown to nature and not melting into your fingers as we speak. Ever stop to picture a man with a Harvard degree, paid a small fortune to find the exact amount of sugar at which your happiness peaks and then quietly stops? Why the cheerful cereal was always parked at the precise height of a toddler in a shopping cart? Who decided a smear of ketchup counted as a vegetable? How the same company that sold your grandfather his cigarettes ended up owning your Jell-O? Why the milk is always as far from the door as the laws of physics allow? Could you resist a snack scientifically built to vanish before your brain notices it has calories? And why did an entire country lose its mind over a soda recipe for about 79 days? Congratulations. You just came to, blinking, on a shag carpet somewhere in suburban America. 1984. Your television is quietly selling toys to your children. Your soda got sweeter last night without telling you. And somewhere in New Jersey, a man is watching a stranger eat spaghetti sauce and writing down numbers. Good luck. You are pushing a shopping cart down the cereal aisle with a 4-year-old strapped into the front seat, and you have made a tactical error. You thought you could get through this aisle quickly. You cannot. Somewhere around the middle shelf, at a height you never chose and never noticed, your child has locked eyes with a cartoon tiger. The negotiation has already begun. You have not said a word yet, and you have already lost, because the shelf itself was arranged to defeat you before you arrived. The tiger has a name, and the name is Tony, and Tony has been placed here with the care of a chess opening. Not at your eye level, where you might reason with him. At hers. Exactly at hers. The box sits low on the shelf, orange and loud, positioned so that a small child gliding past in a cart arrives at the precise altitude of temptation. Somebody measured this. A person, in an office, calculated the average height of a seated toddler's gaze, and then the company paid the store to honour that number down to the inch. Beside Tony sits the plain oatmeal, in a bag the colour of a rainy Tuesday, saying nothing, asking for nothing, radiating the quiet dignity of a product that will lose. The oatmeal is better for your daughter in every measurable way. It is cheaper, calmer, and quieter. It has never once been to a laboratory. It also has no tiger, no maze on the back, no small marshmallow shapes, and therefore it might as well be invisible. The oatmeal never had a chance, and somewhere the oatmeal knows it. A stock boy named Ricky is kneeling at the bottom of the aisle, restocking the low shelf first, always the low shelf, sliding the brightest boxes to the very front where the smallest hands can reach them. He is not being cruel. He is following a planogram, a printed map that tells him precisely where every box belongs, down to the fraction of an inch, and the map was not drawn by anyone who has ever met your daughter. Ricky slides the last box forward, stands, cracks his back, and moves on, having just completed a small act of psychological warfare he will never think about again. What is happening to you has a name in the industry, and the name is pester power. This is the measurable ability of a nagging child to override the shopping decision of a competent adult, and it is not a nuisance the companies tolerate. It is a resource they cultivate. Your daughter is not a distraction from the sale. Your daughter is the sales team, and she works from the seat of the cart, for free, with more persistence than any adult you have ever managed. The negotiation escalates. It begins with pointing. It proceeds to naming, because she knows the tiger. The tiger has been on the television every Saturday for as long as she has been alive. It arrives, finally, at the tone, the one that starts low and threatens to climb, the one that other shoppers have begun to notice. You do the arithmetic every parent does. The cost of the box, the cost of the scene. The box is cheaper than the scene, and everyone in this aisle, including the box, is aware of it. You put the tiger in the cart. Your daughter goes instantly, suspiciously quiet, the calm of a small general who has taken the hill. You tell yourself this was your decision, freely made, a reasonable trade for peace. It was not entirely your decision. It was a plan, drawn on a map, stocked by a tired boy, aimed at a height you never chose, and executed flawlessly by a 4-year-old who cannot yet tie her shoes. The oatmeal watches you go. You avoid the oatmeal's eye. You wake up on a Saturday to the sound of the television already on, because your children rose before you and switched it on themselves, the way they do every weekend now. You shuffle toward the kitchen and glance at the screen. There are robots, there are ponies, there is a muscular man holding a sword, and every few minutes the whole thing dissolves into a commercial for a cereal shaped like the muscular man. You assume you are watching a cartoon. You are not entirely watching a cartoon. The muscular man is named He-Man, and He-Man arrived in 1983 with an unusual origin. He was not a character who later got a toy. He was a toy who later got a character. The plastic came first, sculpted and packaged, and the show was reverse built around it to make children want the plastic. This is the correct order of operations now. The Transformers show up in 1984 built the same way, and so do the ponies, each one loud, colourful, and shameless. A half-hour-long advertisement wearing the costume of a story. For a while this was not allowed, or at least not this openly. Then a man named Mark Fowler took over the Federal Communications Commission in 1981 and decided the whole thing should be left to the market. He said out loud on the record that television was just another appliance, a toaster with pictures. A toaster, he reasoned, does not owe its user an education, and neither does the box in your living room. In 1984, the old limits came off, and the toaster was free to sell your children whatever it liked, for as long as it liked. The results arrived fast and shameless. Between 1984 and 1985, the number of cartoons built around a licensed toy jumped by about 300%. By the end of 1985, there were more than 40 of these things airing at once. An entire Saturday morning that was, technically, a sales floor with a laugh track. The line between the show and the commercial did not blur so much as it was silently erased by people who were paid well to erase it. Your son, whose name is Danny and who is 6, watches all of this with the total undefended attention of someone who has never once suspected he was being sold to. He does not know where the show ends and the ad begins, because at his age the difference is not visible, a fact the industry knew before you did. When the cereal commercial comes on, Danny leans forward and points at the screen and says the name of the cereal in the reverent tone other people reserve for prayer. And here is the part that was arranged most carefully. Danny is often alone when he watches. So are millions of children like him, latchkey kids who let themselves in after school and switch on the television in an empty house, keys still on a string around the neck. The advertisers know the house is empty. They know there is no adult in the room to say, wait, that is not a show. That is a man selling you sugar. The message goes straight in, uninterrupted, into a small person with the front door locked and nobody home to translate. You stand in the kitchen doorway with your coffee and watch your son absorb his 47th commercial of the morning, and you feel a low, useless unease. You could turn it off. But you won't turn it off because it is Saturday and you are tired, and the toaster with pictures is also, if you are honest, the only reason you got to sleep past 7 a.m. The cereal shaped like the muscular man goes on the list without anyone writing it down. Danny already knows it is on the list. Danny put it there himself, hours ago, before you were even awake. You are at the mall on a Tuesday, walking past the fountain toward the shoe store, when a cheerful person with a clipboard stops you and asks if you would like to try 2 colas. There are 2 small white cups on a folding table, marked only with letters. You are told to sip one, then the other, then point at the one you like better. It seems harmless. It seems like a free drink. You have just volunteered for something more organized than you realize. The cheerful person is named Sharon. She is wearing a branded polo shirt, and she has done this 300 times today with the steady patience of a woman who has stopped hearing the fountain. She hands you cup A. She hands you cup B. She watches your face while pretending to watch her clipboard. 2 colas, she says. Just point to the one you like better. And when you point, she makes a small mark and chirps, "Thanks, hun," with the warmth of someone whose warmth is part of the job description. You have just cast a vote in a war, and nobody told you there was a war. The war is between two colas, and it is the defining commercial feud of the decade. Pepsi runs these little tables in malls all over the country and calls the whole thing the Pepsi Challenge. And the tables are not innocent. They are built on a specific piece of knowledge. In a single sip, with nothing else to judge it against, the human tongue reaches for the sweeter of two drinks almost every time. Pepsi is the sweeter drink. Pepsi wins the sip. This is not an accident of taste. It is the entire point of the table. The trick sits in the difference between a sip and a can. A sip rewards sweetness instantly, a bright, quick, and weightless little jolt. A whole can, drunk slowly on a hot afternoon, is a different test, one where too much sweetness begins to cloy and wear on you around the halfway point. The mall table only ever measures the sip. It has chosen the one contest its product is built to win, the way a person picks an arm wrestling match with a toddler and then acts surprised to win it. Coca-Cola, watching these tables fill up with pointing fingers, begins to panic in a way that will end very badly for it. But that is a later segment and a longer story. For now, understand that a plastic cup of flat cola on a folding table has become a genuine threat to one of the largest companies on earth. Somewhere, executives are looking at Sharon's clipboard totals, multiplied by 1,000 Sharons in 1,000 malls, and feeling their stomachs drop. You, meanwhile, have finished both cups and are feeling unreasonably pleased with yourself, because you correctly identified the one you liked, and being right about something at a mall on a Tuesday is a rare pleasure. What you don't know is that you liked it because it was sweeter, and that it was sweeter on purpose, calibrated to win exactly the 10-second test you just took. The cup does not tell you these things. The cup is not on your side. The cup was never on your side. Sharon caps her pen, restacks her little tower of cups, and resets the table for the next person drifting past the fountain, a man with a pretzel who is about to become another mark on the clipboard. You wander off toward the shoe store with the faint aftertaste of victory and corn syrup. Somewhere in a headquarters, your single anonymous point is being added to a mountain of identical points, and the mountain is about to convince a very old company to do something spectacularly foolish. You bought nothing. You still, somehow, took part in a sale. You have been paid $20 to sit in a windowless room in New Jersey and eat spaghetti sauce. In front of you is a tray of little numbered paper cups, dozens of them, each holding a slightly different sauce. Your only job is to taste each one and rate how much you like it on a card. You assume someone will read your card and pick a good recipe. What is actually happening to your card is considerably more mathematical than you have been told. The man who designed this room is named Howard Moskowitz, and he has a doctorate from Harvard in the science of perception, which he has pointed with great precision at your lunch. He does not taste the sauces himself, he watches. He collects the cards, thousands of them, and he feeds the numbers into a model that finds a single hidden point buried in all that pointing and sipping. He calls it the bliss point, and finding it is the entire reason you are in this room chewing your way through cup number 31. Let's talk about the bliss point. It is not the most sugar, or the most salt, or the most of anything, which is the surprise. If you keep adding sugar to a sauce, people like it more, and then, past a certain summit, they like it less, because it curdles into something cloying, syrupy, and strange. Plot the liking against the sweetness, and you do not get a rising line. You get a hill. Moskowitz is not looking for the top of the sugar. He is looking for the top of the hill, the exact spot where your pleasure peaks and has not yet begun to sour, and he can find it to a decimal place. Right now he is doing this for a sauce called Prego, which is losing badly to a rival and sulking on the shelf like a jar nobody invites to parties. So he has built 45 different versions, each one nudged along in sweetness, in spice, in thickness, in the size of the tomato chunks. He is running all of them past rooms full of people just like you. He is not asking what you want, because he learned long ago that you do not know what you want and cannot say it out loud. He is watching what you reach for, which is a different and far more honest thing. And the rooms tell him something nobody asked for. Buried in the cards is a large group of people who secretly crave a sauce thick with chunks, a chunky sauce so aggressive it does not yet exist on any shelf in America. Nobody ever wrote extra chunky on a wish list. Nobody knew to want it, but the numbers know, and the numbers do not lie. And so Prego builds the thing the cards revealed, and it goes on to earn a fortune with more zeros than you will see on your $20 check. Moskowitz sits with his model, adjusting a variable, watching the predicted pleasure climb toward its summit. Calm as a man tuning a piano, he is not a villain. He is genuinely delighted by the elegance of it. Human joy has a shape, he says, more or less. And the shape can be drawn. I'm just giving people more of what they like, he would tell you, cheerfully. He is also, at the same time, building sauces optimized past the point where a reasonable person can push the jar away, and both of these things are true at once. You finish the last cup, hand in your card, and collect your $20 from a clerk who has seen 1,000 of you. You walk out into the New Jersey parking lot feeling like you did someone a small favor. You did. You handed a stranger one more coordinate on a map of your own appetite, a map he is drawing very carefully, and a map you will never be allowed to see. You pull into the convenience store for a drink and discover that the cup situation has changed again. Last year the large seemed large. This year there is something above the large, and something above that, a cup so tall it will not fit the holder in your car. You do the math in your head, the way you are supposed to, and the biggest cup costs barely more than the small one. You tell yourself you will not finish it. You reach for it anyway. The cup in question is 32 ounces. It is called the Big Gulp, and 7-Eleven introduced it in 1980 as if it were a perfectly normal amount of soda for one person to drink alone in a parked car. This is less a cup than a small reservoir. Held at arm's length, it has the silhouette of a paint bucket, and it sweats in your hand like it is nervous. A generation ago, this quantity of cola would have been considered a party. Now it is considered a single serving, and the word single is doing an enormous amount of quiet work. The reason the giant cup costs so little more than the small one is a piece of arithmetic that runs entirely in the store's favor. The soda itself is almost free, cheap, sweet, and endless. It is syrup and carbonated water, pennies of each, mixed on site. What you are actually paying for is the cup, the lid, the straw, and the sliver of profit stacked on top. And all of those stay roughly the same, whether the cup holds a little or a lot. So the store can afford to make the huge size look like a bargain, because the huge size is where the money hides, and the bargain is bait wearing the costume of generosity. Behind the counter, a clerk named Doreen refills the syrup box without being asked, hooking the plastic line back into place with the bored competence of someone who has done it 4 times this shift. The machine drinks syrup the way you are about to drink its output, steadily and without comment. Doreen has watched the cups grow year over year the same way you have, and she no longer finds the paint bucket remarkable. Nobody does. That is how the trick works. It does not shock you. It simply becomes the new normal, 1 inch of plastic at a time. And here is the part your body never sees coming. Liquid sugar is uniquely easy to overpour into yourself, because the stomach barely registers a drink the way it registers food. A meal fills you and files a report. A river of sweet cola slips past all the sentries, delivering an astonishing load of sugar while your appetite shrugs and says it noticed nothing. You can drink 400 calories through a straw and still arrive at dinner genuinely hungry, which is not a flaw in the product. It is the feature the product was built around. So you carry the cup to your car, where it does not fit the holder, and you wedge it between your knees like a co-pilot, and you drive off sipping. It is cold. It is sweet. It is, in the moment, exactly right, tuned by people who know precisely how right it needs to be. You have every intention of drinking half. You will drink most of it before the next traffic light, and the straw will make that hollow rattling sound at the bottom, the sound of a reservoir run dry, long before you expected it. By the time you get home, the cup is empty and you cannot quite account for it. There was so much of it, and then there was none, and your body is somehow still waiting for a meal it thinks it never had. The cup, its work done, gets tossed in the trash, where it stands upright and enormous, taking up more room than any single drink has a right to. Next year it will be bigger. You already know this. You will reach for it anyway. You are idling in a drive-through lane with a child in the back seat who does not actually want food. Your child wants the toy. The food is simply the container the toy arrives in, an unavoidable step, like a shipping fee. You order the small cardboard box with a handle, and the moment it comes through the window, your child ignores the burger entirely and begins excavating the bottom of the bag. You have paid for a meal. You have purchased a delivery system for a small piece of plastic. The box has a name, the Happy Meal, and McDonald's introduced it in 1979, then spent the whole of the next decade turning it into a fixture of childhood. The food is no longer the reward. The food is the obstacle between your child and the reward is a 2-inch figurine that will be lost under the couch by Thursday. Some executive figured out that a child will drag a parent across town not for a burger but for a trinket, and then built a business on that exact leverage. The trinket rotates, which is the second half of the trap. It is never just a toy. It is one of a set, a series, a collection with a gap in it, and the gap is unbearable to a 7-year-old. You do not have the dinosaur. Everyone has the dinosaur. To get the dinosaur, you must return and buy another meal and hope, because you cannot choose which one you get, which means the whole thing runs on the sweet agony of maybe. A child does not have the defenses for maybe. Very few adults do either. Presiding over all of this is a man made entirely of reassurance, a cheerful clown named Ronald who has been installed in your child's imagination as a kind of friend. Ronald does not sell anything. Ronald simply exists warmly near the playground and the golden arches, so that the whole building feels less like a business and more like a destination that happens to love your family. The playground is not a courtesy. The playground is a reason to come, a reason that has nothing to do with food and everything to do with keeping the small customer loyal before the small customer can spell the word loyal. At the window, a teenager named Marcus hands you the box with a practiced smile of someone on his 4th hour, and he drops the toy in without being asked, because he knows, everyone knows, that the toy is the transaction and the burger is the receipt. Marcus has watched 100 children today reach past perfectly good fries to dig for a sealed plastic pouch. He no longer finds it strange. It is simply the shape of the job, the same reach, the same shriek of triumph, 100 times a shift. And the food itself, ignored though it is, has been built for the same small hands. It is soft, uniform, and yielding. It requires no cutting, no negotiation, no fork. It is designed to vanish while the child's attention is elsewhere, which is precisely where the child's attention is, aimed at the toy like a compass at north. You will find half the burger later, cold, abandoned in the bottom of the bag, its purpose served. Its purpose was never to be eaten. Its purpose was to legally accompany the toy out of the building. You pull out of the lot with a satisfied child and a bag of food nobody wanted, having paid real money for a piece of plastic wrapped in a hamburger. You tell yourself it was a treat, a small kindness on a busy day, and it was. It was also a lesson your child is learning without knowing it, that happiness comes in a box with a handle, that the box can be returned to, again and again, that somewhere there is always one more toy you do not yet have. Marcus is already handing the next box out the window. The dinosaur, wherever it is still missing. You are handing your child a cardboard sleeve of small breaded objects, and you notice, not for the first time, that they are all the same size, same soft rounded shape, same obedient way of holding a puddle of sauce. Your child eats them in a rhythm, dip and bite, without looking up. There is nothing accidental about how easy this is. The thinking has been quietly removed, so a child never has to notice a bite at all. These are chicken McNuggets, and they went national in 1983 to a reception that bordered on hysteria, selling faster than the company could figure out how to supply them. Part of the reason sits right there on the little sleeve. A real piece of chicken is a problem for a child. It has bones and gristle and unpredictable geography, dark bits and pale bits, and a texture that changes as you chew. The nugget has solved all of that. It has been ground down, reassembled, and cast into a shape with no surprises in it. And a bite with no surprises is a bite a child will never hesitate over. There are, in fact, exactly 4 recognized shapes, and they were chosen on purpose, tested and named inside the company like models of a car. Each one is small enough to eat in 2 bites, sturdy enough to survive a dunk, and bland enough to carry whatever sauce you pour on it without an argument. The nugget does not have a flavor so much as it has a willingness. It is a blank, agreeable little raft, and the sauce is the passenger, and the child is the harbour, and the whole voyage takes about 4 seconds. The dipping is not a garnish either. The dipping is the game. A plain food is eaten and forgotten, but a food that comes with a ritual, a little cup, a plunge, a choice between the red one and the tangy one, becomes an activity. An activity holds a child's attention far longer than a taste ever could. Your daughter is not merely eating. She is operating a small, repetitive, deeply satisfying machine, and the machine happens to end with food in her mouth every single time. Somewhere in the chain that produced this sleeve, a food technologist named Elena once stood over a fryer with a stopwatch, timing exactly how long the coating stayed crisp before it surrendered to the steam inside, adjusting the batter until the crunch lasted precisely as long as a child's patience. That was her job, and she was good at it. And she went home at night having made the world's most consistent bite of chicken slightly more consistent. She was not thinking about your daughter. She was thinking about the crunch curve, which is a real thing, and which she had been asked to perfect. And the effect on the small eater is total. Your daughter has stopped narrating her day. She has stopped kicking the table leg. She has entered the particular trance that only frictionless food produces, the calm of a child who has to do absolutely no work to be fed, dip and bite, a metronome in a booster seat. You could get up and leave and she would not notice for a full minute. The nugget asks nothing of her, and she is grateful. In the wordless way, children are grateful to whatever removes an obstacle. You watch the little sleeve empty itself and you feel the low pull of the thing yourself, because they are built to be exactly as easy for you as they are for her. There is no bone to slow you down, no decision to make, no reason to stop until the cardboard is bare. That is the whole design, hiding in plain sight, dressed up as convenience. The nugget is not trying to nourish anyone. The nugget is trying to be effortless, and it has succeeded so completely that you have already eaten 3 off your daughter's tray without deciding to. You get home at 6:15 p.m. with 2 hungry children and no intention of cooking anything that requires a cutting board. You open the freezer, take out a flat box, pierce the film with a fork the way the instructions demand, and put the whole arrangement into the microwave. 6 minutes later there is dinner, steaming in its own tray, portioned into little compartments so nothing touches. You did not cook this. You reheated a decision somebody made in a factory 2 years ago, and you are grateful for it. The machine that makes this possible has only recently stopped being a luxury. Now it sits on your counter like it has always been there, and an entire industry has grown up around it overnight, rushing to fill 6 minutes of your evening with something that can be sold. The appliance created a shape, a little rectangle of time and hunger, and the freezer aisle exists to pour product into that exact rectangle. The box promises the impossible, which is a home-cooked meal that no one at home cooked. On the front there is a photograph of food more confident than anything that will emerge from your microwave, glistening, arranged, lit like a portrait. What comes out is a fainter cousin of the photograph, softer and paler, but it is hot, and it is dinner, and it arrived faster than an argument, and on a Tuesday that is a complete victory. The photograph and the tray are not the same food. They are barely the same species. Nobody minds. The box also knows just who you are on a given night, which is why it comes in personalities. One line is called Lean Cuisine, and Stouffer's launched it in 1981 for the version of you that stepped on the scale this morning and made promises. The tray is small, the portion is disciplined, the name itself is an apology and a resolution folded into 2 words. Right beside it, in the same freezer, sits its opposite, a dinner built for a hungry man, an enormous slab of meat and gravy for the version of you that has given up on promises entirely. The companies do not care which one you buy. They have simply prepared a tray for each of your moods and set them side by side, waiting. What unites both trays, the virtuous and the enormous, is what had to be done to make food survive 2 years in a freezer and still taste like anything. The answer is salt and sugar and fat and a long back panel of ingredients that read less like a recipe and more like a chemistry exam. Flavor that lasts that long does not occur in nature. It is built, stabilized, and locked in, and the lock is mostly sodium. Your disciplined little lean cuisine, the one apologizing on the front, is often carrying a startling amount of salt just to taste like dinner at all. A food scientist named Warren spent a good part of the decade solving exactly this problem, standing in a test kitchen tasting the same beef entree at week 1, week 20, and week 80, adjusting the formula until the 80th week tasted as much like the first as chemistry would allow. That was the whole job, holding flavour still against time, and it is genuinely hard, and Warren was genuinely good at it. He was not thinking about your kitchen. He was thinking about the decay curve, which is real, and which he had been hired to defeat. So you set the tray in front of your children, who eat it happily in its little compartments, the peas kept safely apart from the sauce, and the evening is saved without a single pot to wash. You feel the specific relief of a person who has been rescued from their own exhaustion by a factory in another state. It is, in fact, exactly the feeling the box was built to sell, priced and packaged and stacked in the cold aisle, waiting for a Tuesday like this one. The photograph on the empty box smiles up from the trash, still glistening, still lying. You are packing lunch at 7 a.m., running late, and you reach past the bread for the bright yellow tray you bought specifically so you would not have to do this. Inside are round crackers, round meat, and square cheese, each in its own little plastic bay. Your child will assemble them personally, which apparently is the entire appeal. You snap it into the lunchbox, feeling something that is almost relief and almost guilt. That exact feeling has a designer and a price tag, and you just paid it without blinking. The tray is called Lunchables, and it launched across the country in 1988 after a quiet test run the year before in a couple of unsuspecting towns. It was invented by a man named Bob Drain, an executive at Oscar Mayer, and it was born not out of a dream about children but out of a crisis about bologna. Bologna sales were sliding. The lunch meat was sitting in refrigerators unloved, and Drain was handed the problem of making people want it again. What he came up with did not taste better than the old bologna. It was simply packaged as a rescue. Drain's insight was that he was not selling food at all. He was selling a morning back to a tired parent. The genuine product inside that yellow tray is not the meat or the crackers. It is the 90 seconds you did not have to spend at the counter, the argument you did not have to have, the small, clean feeling of a decision already made for you. He understood, and later said as much. "We weren't selling lunch," he admitted. "We were selling a morning back." What he had really built was relief with a picture of a sandwich on it, worth far more to you than the ingredients cost him. The children, for their part, do not care about any of this. They care that they get to build it. The whole tray runs on the strange magic of assembly, the fact that a child who will not eat a sandwich you made will happily eat the identical sandwich if allowed to stack it himself. Cracker, meat, cheese, cracker, like a tiny bricklayer at a folding lunch table. Drain's team discovered that letting the kid do the last small act of construction transformed lunch from a chore into a project, and a project gets eaten. The tray does not feed the child feeds the child, and feels proud about it. Nutritionally, the yellow tray is a modest disaster wearing a cheerful coat. It is salty, fatty, and faintly pink, heavy with processed meat the color of a faded valentine, and it makes no real attempt to be otherwise. But it does not need to be otherwise, because it is not being judged on nutrition. It is being judged at 7 a.m. by a parent with car keys in one hand, and against that judge, on that clock, the tray wins every single morning, which is the contest it was designed to enter. Bob Drain spent 2 decades at the company and would, many years later, admit to a quiet unease about the thing he had made, a father looking back at a product that taught a generation that lunch comes sealed in plastic bays. He never denied its brilliance. He simply sat with the fact that brilliance and worry can live in the same man at the same time, that you can be proud of a solution and uncertain about the world it helped build. He was not a villain. He was an inventor who solved his assignment a little too well. You snap the lid on the lunchbox and slide it across the counter to your son, who lights up at the sight of the yellow. The whole transaction takes 3 seconds and costs you a flicker of something you do not examine. You have bought your morning back. You have handed your child a small building project disguised as a meal. And a man in Wisconsin who worried about exactly this has already been proven right, in your kitchen, before the school bus has even turned the corner. You are sitting on the couch with a bag of orange puffs and you have lost track of how many you have eaten. Each one dissolves the instant it hits your tongue, gone before you can properly notice it, which somehow makes the next one feel free. Your fingers are stained a colour not found in nature. The bag, which felt full a moment ago, makes a sad crinkle when you reach in again. You did not decide to eat the whole thing. The whole thing simply happened to you. There is a food scientist named Stephen Witherley who has thought harder about this exact bag than anyone should, and he has a name for what it is doing to you. He calls it vanishing caloric density, and it is possibly the most elegant trick in the entire snack aisle. When a puff melts almost instantly in your mouth, your brain performs a quick, confident, completely wrong calculation. It reasons that a thing which disappears so fast could not possibly contain much of anything. No weight, no substance, no calories. Permission granted. Keep going. The genius and the cruelty is that your fullness never catches up. Ordinarily, your body keeps a rough ledger, a slow accountant in the back who tallies what you have eaten and eventually taps you on the shoulder to say, "That is enough." But the puff dissolves before the accountant can even write it down. Nothing lands with enough weight to be recorded, so the ledger stays blank, and the accountant keeps waiting for a meal that technically never arrived, and your hand keeps moving because as far as your brain is concerned, you have not yet begun. Witherly would tell you, with real admiration in his voice, that the Cheeto is one of the most perfectly engineered foods on the planet, and he means it as the kind of compliment an engineer gives a bridge. Everything about it is tuned. The way it yields with almost no resistance. The way the coating hits first, loud, salty, and sharp, before the puff itself surrenders. The way it leaves your mouth clean and ready, asking for the next one, having somehow both fed you and not fed you at the same time. It is a magic trick performed on your own appetite, and you are both the audience and the rabbit. The orange dust is part of the spell, not a flaw in it. It stains your fingertips a shade of orange that occurs nowhere in the natural world, a colour with the structural loyalty of a tattoo, surviving one hand wash and then a second, still faintly there at bedtime like a small confession. But that lingering dust is a feature. It keeps the snack present after the snack is gone, a reminder on your own hands, so that even the cleanup makes you think about eating one more. Nothing about this puff wants to leave you alone, and it never gives you the honest signal of stopping, the greasy heaviness a fattier food would eventually deliver. There is no moment of enough. There is only the puff, and then the next puff, and then the strange hollow surprise of the bag going light in your hand, the crinkle changing pitch, the reach that comes back with nothing. You look down and the bag is a deflated foil ghost, and you genuinely cannot reconstruct the events that emptied it. There was no meal here. There was only a series of individually forgettable moments that added up, behind your back, to dinner. You fold the empty bag over, which does nothing, and you sit with the particular bafflement of a person outwitted by a cheese puff. None of this is weakness. You are simply outmaneuvered by a man in a lab coat who figured out how to make food that your brain refuses to count. The dust is still on your fingers. It will be there for hours, a small orange souvenir of a snack you don't remember eating, reminding you, gently, insistently, that there is always another bag. You are watching television with a bag of triangular chips, and you have reached the stage of the evening where your fingertips are coated in a fine, seasoned powder. You lick them, because that is the only reasonable response, and the licking is somehow the best part. The flavour does not sit on the chip so much as cling to your hands, waiting. You tell yourself you will stop after this handful. Your hand, which has developed its own opinions over the course of the night, disagrees. These are Doritos, and while the chip itself dates back to the 60s, it was the nacho cheese flavour and the decade you are sitting in that turned it into a national habit. The chip is really just the raft. The cargo is the seasoning, that vivid orange powder that Frito-Lay has calibrated with a seriousness usually reserved for medicine. It is built to be a little too much, a flavour that arrives loud, salty, tangy, and vaguely cheese-like. Then, crucially, does not fully settle, leaving you faintly unsatisfied in a way that reads to your tongue as an invitation rather than a complaint. At Frito-Lay there is a whole discipline devoted to this, and much of it runs through a psychologist named Dwight Risky, whose actual salaried job is to understand why your hand keeps going back into the bag. Risky and his colleagues study the seasoning cling, the exact amount of powder that adheres to a chip and then to your fingers, because they discovered the fingers matter enormously. A chip you can eat cleanly is a chip you can walk away from. A chip that marks you, that leaves evidence, keeps the whole experience going after the chewing stops, because now you have to deal with your hands. And dealing with your hands means licking them, which is its own small pleasure, a hit of concentrated seasoning with no chip attached, pure cargo and no raft. This is not a side effect. It is arguably the main event. The powder is designed to be the thing you crave, and the triangle is merely the vehicle that carries it to you and then, generously, leaves a second helping on your fingertips for later. You aren't just eating a chip and then cleaning up. You are eating a chip in 2 courses, and the second course is your own hand. Risky also learned something quietly unsettling about the salt, which is that your appetite for it is not fixed at birth like an eye colour. It is trained. Feed people a little more salt, steadily, patiently, over weeks, and their sense of the correct amount drifts upward, so that the level that once seemed like plenty begins to taste like a mistake. Frito-Lay did not have to sneak up on your salt craving. They simply had to keep feeding it, gently, and let it grow, one bag at a time, until the loud chip tasted normal and the quiet one tasted broken. So the bag on your lap is doing two things at once, both of them on purpose. It is delivering a seasoning built to leave you a half step short of satisfied, and it is slowly, over years of bags just like this one, raising the floor of what you need to feel anything at all. The chip that thrilled you a decade ago would taste faint to you now, underseasoned, sad, a chip that forgot its job. Your standards did not slip on their own. Your standards were carefully escalated, in a laboratory, by a man with a clipboard and a grant. You reach in again, of course, because the licking led naturally to another handful, the way it was built to, and the orange dust renews itself on your fingertips like a debt that refuses to clear. Somewhere in Texas, Dwight Risky is not thinking about you tonight, but he thought about you years ago, in the abstract, as a hand and a tongue and a slowly rising set point, and he did his job with real skill. The bag rustles. Your fingers are marked. You lick them again. The chip has, technically, won. You are standing in front of a vending machine at 3 p.m. because the afternoon has defeated you and you need something. Behind the glass, a metal coil is holding a candy bar hostage, and all you have to do to free it is feed the machine 2 quarters. There is no fruit in here. There was never going to be fruit in here. The machine offers you exactly one category of thing, at exactly the hour you are weakest, and it is always awake, always humming, always ready. The machine has staked out the perfect position, and it did not choose that position by accident. It stands in the break room, on the path between your desk and the coffee, at the precise point in the day when your willpower runs thin and your blood sugar dips and the meeting that ran long has left you frayed. It does not need to persuade you. It simply needs to be there, glowing faintly when you arrive already defeated. A tempting thing you have to go find is easy to resist. A tempting thing standing directly in your path at 3 p.m. is a different opponent entirely. Behind the glass, the products are arranged like a lineup of familiar accomplices, the candy bars from Mars and Hershey that have been competing for this exact slot for years, each one a known, reliable, and familiar quantity, each one calibrated to deliver its payload fast and leave you wanting the next. There is nothing here you have to think about. That is the point. The machine sells certainty, the reliable little rush of a thing you have had 100 times, at the hour when thinking is the last thing you have the strength to do. And the coil, that slow metal spiral, is a small piece of theatre all its own. You press the buttons, the coil turns, and the candy bar inches forward toward the edge with agonizing patience, teetering, making you wait, making you watch, until it finally tips and falls. The machine could simply drop it. It does not. It performs a tiny suspense every time, a 2-second drama with a guaranteed happy ending, and the wanting only sharpens in those 2 seconds. The machine, in its dim, humming way, understands anticipation better than most people do. Your co-worker Janet is behind you now waiting her turn, because Janet also knows what 3 p.m. does to a person. Long one? Janet asks. The worst, you say, and that is the entire conversation, the nod of fellow travellers while she watches her own coil begin to turn. The whole office runs on this quiet afternoon ritual, a slow migration to the humming box. Nobody has ever once questioned why the one machine in the room offers only sugar and salt, and never, not once, an apple. The apple would not sell. Everyone involved has quietly agreed not to stock the thing that would not sell. What makes the machine so patient, so undefeatable, is that it never gets tired and you always do. It does not have a bad afternoon. It does not lose its resolve. It stands there, fully stocked, gently lit, 24 hours a day, waiting for the one moment in your day when you are least equipped to walk past it, confident that if it just keeps standing there, sooner or later you will arrive weak. It only has to win once a day. You have to win every single time, and you will not. So you feed it your quarters, and the coil turns, and the bar tips and falls with a soft thud into the tray, and for a moment the afternoon feels survivable again. You carry your small rectangle of relief back to your desk, having lost a contest you did not know you had entered against an opponent that does not sleep. The machine hums behind you, already resetting, already patient, already waiting for tomorrow at 3 p.m, when you will be tired again, and it will not. You have made it through the entire supermarket without buying anything foolish, and now you are trapped in the checkout line with a conveyor belt in front of you and a wall of candy at your elbow. This is the ambush. Everything within reach of your idle hand is small, sweet, and priced to be an afterthought. Your child, who is again at exactly the right height, has noticed the candy too. The last 3 feet of this store were designed by someone who understood exactly how tired you would be. Everything about this position has been arranged to catch you at your weakest. You have been walking for 40 minutes. You have made 200 small decisions about brands and prices and whether the coupon still applies. Your resolve, which was firm and righteous in the produce section, has been quietly draining the whole time, and now, at the register, it is nearly empty. Decision fatigue is a real and measurable thing, and the checkout lane is where the store waits to collect on it. At the exact moment you have the least left to give, and now you must stand still. The line does not move. The person ahead of you is writing a check with the deliberation of a monk, and you have nothing to do with your eyes or your hands. So your eyes drift, and there is the candy, and there are the little packs of gum, and there is the tabloid promising a 2-headed baby, all of it placed at the precise altitude of a bored, idle, waiting hand. The store has turned your boredom into a sales opportunity. It has monetized the pause. The items here are small on purpose, and cheap on purpose, because the whole trap depends on the price being low enough to slip under your judgment. A candy bar at the register does not feel like a purchase. It feels like a reflex, a little nothing, a coin toss you win by getting a treat. You would never walk into a store specifically to buy this. You are only buying it because you happen to be standing next to it, immobilized, depleted, at the end of a long march, which is the only circumstance under which it sells. Your daughter, meanwhile, has begun her own campaign, because the candy is at her height too, deliberately, the same low reach that governed the cereal aisle now weaponized again at the very last moment. The cashier, a patient woman named Gloria who has watched this scene play out 10,000 times, keeps her eyes politely on the register and says nothing, because the candy at her elbow is not her idea and the child's tears are not her problem. Gloria scans the groceries in a steady rhythm and lets the wall do its work. The cruelty of the design is that it targets you after you thought the test was over. You did the hard part. You navigated the whole store, resisted the end caps, ignored the free samples, and you were feeling quietly proud. And it is precisely that relaxed, finished feeling that the checkout lane preys upon. You let your guard down because you believed the shopping was done. The shopping was not done. The most carefully engineered 3 feet of the entire building were saved for last, for the exact moment you stopped defending yourself. So the candy goes on the belt, either the one you grabbed or the one your daughter did. It rides toward Gloria with the milk and the eggs like it belongs there, like it was always on the list. It costs almost nothing, which is the point, and it will be eaten in the car before you reach the highway, which is also the point. You walk out having bought one thing you did not plan to buy, at the one spot in the store designed to make sure you would. The next person in line is already looking at the wall, their guard is already down. You crack open your usual can of cola, and something is wrong. It is sweeter, rounder, it tastes like it is trying to be liked, and it is trying a little too hard. You check the can, and yes, this is the same brand you have trusted your whole life, except the company has quietly changed the formula and expects you to be pleased. You are not pleased. Across the country, a great many people are also, at this exact moment, not pleased, and some of them are reaching for the telephone. What has happened is that Coca-Cola, spooked by all those mall tables and all those pointing fingers, has done the unthinkable. In April 1985, it threw out the recipe it had guarded for nearly a century and replaced it with a sweeter, rounder, and friendlier recipe, closer to its rival, reworked to win the very sip test that had been humiliating it. The company had the data said people preferred the new flavor. The company trusted the data completely, and the data, it turns out, had measured the wrong thing entirely, because the data measured taste, and the thing it forgot to measure was love. People did not merely drink this cola. They had grown up with it, buried relatives who drank it, associated it with 100 ordinary afternoons, and you cannot capture that in a plastic cup at a mall. When the company changed the recipe, it did not change a beverage. It reached into millions of kitchens and rearranged a piece of everyone's childhood, and the country responded as if a national landmark had been demolished overnight. The reaction was not proportional to a soft drink, and that is what made it magnificent. The company was buried under tens of thousands of furious letters. A telephone hotline rang off the hook with people grieving, actually grieving, a flavor. Somebody in Seattle started a protest group and gave interviews. People drove across state lines to hoard cases of the old formula while it lasted, stacking cans in basements like a coming siege. A man wrote to complain and addressed the letter to the dumbest executive in America, trusting it would be delivered to the right desk. The executives, who had been so sure, watched this unfold with the specific horror of people who did everything the research told them to do and were being burned at the stake for it anyway. They had optimized. They had tested. They had followed the numbers straight off a cliff. And now the numbers were no help at all, because there is no equation for the fury of a nation that has had its comfort meddled with. The bliss point had found the sweeter drink. It had not thought to ask whether anyone wanted to be handed it. So the company surrendered, fast, and the surrender is the most telling part of the whole affair. In about 79 days, less than 3 months, the old formula came back, now wearing the slightly desperate word classic on the label, an apology dressed as a product name. The executives went on television and all but admitted they had been beaten by their own customers, that the people had wanted the old thing so badly they had forced a giant corporation to reverse itself in under a season. It was a humiliation and secretly a gift, because you cannot buy proof of loyalty like that. You, meanwhile, get your old cola back, and you drink it with the quiet satisfaction of a person whose complaint was heard, unaware that your outrage was the most valuable thing you produced all year. The whole episode revealed both halves of the machine at once. It showed how precisely a flavour can be dialed in to win a test, and it showed that a test is not a life, that people cling to their manufactured comforts with a ferocity no laboratory predicted. The can in your hand tastes like it always did. It tastes, more than anything, like winning. You are standing in the aisle holding a box of cookies that claims to be good for you, and you want very badly to believe it. The word on the front is light. The word on the front is reduced. 5. You turn the box over, the way a responsible person does, and the number that has gone down is the fat, while the number beside it, the sugar, has quietly gone up to take its place. You put the box in the cart anyway. The label did its job, and its job was you. The reason this box exists is that the whole country has decided, all at once, that fat is the enemy. The diet advice of the moment has singled out fat as the villain in every story, the thing making everyone heavier. The food companies have responded not by making you eat less, but by handing you permission to eat more, as long as it says the magic word. Remove the fat, print it proudly on the front, and a cookie transforms into a health decision. The math of your body has not changed. The math on the box has. Fat is not just calories. Fat is what makes a cookie taste like a cookie. The richness, the tenderness, the way it coats the mouth and feels like a reward. Strip it out, and you are left with something flat, bland, and cardboard adjacent. A cookie in name only. A cookie that has given up. Nobody buys a sad cookie twice. So the reformulation could not simply subtract. It had to replace, and the cheapest, most reliable thing to replace lost pleasure with is sugar. So the fat comes out and the sugar goes in, sometimes in greater quantity than before, and the finished product proudly announces its lower fat while saying nothing about the sweetness that rushed in to fill the gap. A food scientist named Priscilla spent months in a test kitchen doing exactly this arithmetic, tasting version after version of a low-fat cookie, tuning the sugar up notch by notch until the thing tasted good enough to sell again, then handing it off to the marketers who had put the reassuring word on the box. She was not lying. The fat really was lower. She simply was not asked to advertise everything she added. Then the label does something almost magical to your behavior, something the companies understood perfectly. A food that feels virtuous gets eaten in larger amounts, because the guilt that would normally slow you down has been switched off. You eat 4 of the good cookies where you would have stopped at 2 of the honest ones, because the box told you these were fine. These were the responsible choice. These were practically a salad. The health halo does not just sell the box. It sells the second helping, and the third, and it does it while you feel proud. The genius of the whole maneuver is that it turns your good intentions into a marketing channel. You came to this aisle trying to do the right thing, and the industry took that impulse, the honest desire to eat better, and sold it back to you as a slightly worse cookie wearing a nurse's uniform. Your virtue was not an obstacle to overcome. Your virtue was the target, the soft spot, the exact lever they pulled, and it worked precisely because you were trying to be good. So you carry the box to the register believing you have made a small wise choice, and in a sense you have made no choice at all, because the box was built to be chosen by a person feeling just what you are feeling. In a few years it will have a famous name and a green box and a whole aisle of imitators, but the logic is already fully formed in your cart tonight. Remove the villain, add the sweetness, print the word, and let the shopper's own conscience close the sale. You close it. You feel good about it. The cookie loves you back, and it is mostly sugar. You are drinking the same soda you always drink, from the same red can, and you have no idea that the sweetness in your hand is no longer the sweetness of your childhood. Sometime recently, the company swapped the sugar for something cheaper made from corn, quietly, in the middle of the night, without a press conference or a warning on the can. It costs them less. It pours easier. It sits on a shelf forever. You were not consulted, because you were never going to be the one they asked. The swap happened in November 1984, and both of the great cola rivals did it at nearly the same moment, converting their flagship drinks to 100% high fructose corn syrup. They did not do it because it tasted better. They did it because it was cheaper. And the reason it was cheaper is a small masterpiece of accidental policy that almost nobody in the country understood was shaping their kitchen. Let's talk about the trick, because it runs entirely through the government. For decades, the country has propped up its own sugar growers by making it expensive to bring cheap sugar in from abroad, which keeps the price of real sugar high on purpose. At the very same time, it pays its corn farmers to grow mountains of corn, so much corn that the price of it falls through the floor. So you have haughty, expensive sugar sitting next to corn so cheap it is practically apologizing, and some clever chemists long ago figured out how to turn that cheap corn into a sweet syrup. The result was inevitable. Why buy the costly sweetener when the policy has laid a cheaper one right at your feet? The corn syrup had other charms too, beyond the price. It blends into a liquid more smoothly than sugar, no crystals, no settling, a syrup that folds into the drink and stays there obediently. It also extends the shelf life, letting a can sit in a warehouse or a pantry for a small eternity without turning. From the company's side, it was the perfect ingredient, cheaper, easier, and longer lasting all at once. A rare case where the accountant, the chemist, and the warehouse manager all agreed. The only party with no vote in the matter was the tongue attached to the person drinking it, and that person, which is you, was told nothing. There was no announcement, no banner on the can, no acknowledgement that the sweetness had quietly changed its source. The recipe on the label simply listed its new ingredient in the same small print as everything else, and the drink went on looking identical, tasting close enough, and costing the company noticeably less per case. A change was made to the most popular beverage in the country, and it was made invisibly on the reasonable assumption that you would not notice and would not think to care. What made it matter was not any single can, but the sheer ocean of the stuff. When the cheapest possible sweetener becomes the default in the most popular drink in the country, and the cups keep getting bigger, the drink keeps getting closer and cheaper, the total tide of sweetness a body takes on rises far past anything a person would ever have chosen deliberately. Nobody sat down and decided to drink this much sugar. The decision was made upstream, in a farm policy and a boardroom, and it flowed downhill into every glass without anyone at the bottom being asked. So you finish your can, satisfied, none the wiser, having just consumed a small monument to the strange logic that governs what ends up in your hand. The sweetness tastes like it always did, near enough, and that near enough was the whole point, designed to slip past you unremarked. Somewhere a farmer is growing more corn than the country could ever eat as food, and it is being turned into the syrup in your glass instead. The loop closes quietly, cheaply, invisibly, exactly as it was built to. You drink it. You were never the one they asked. You are 8 years old and you are digging. Somewhere at the bottom of this box of sugared flakes there is a small plastic toy sealed in a wrapper, and reaching it is now the most important task of your morning. You plunge your arm in up to the elbow, spilling cereal across the table, because the toy is the point and the breakfast is merely the medium it is buried in. Your mother tells you to stop. You do not stop. The box was built to make you dig, and you are digging. The prize is at the bottom for a reason, and the reason is patient, quiet, and cruel. If the toy sat on top, the game would be over in a second, and the box would have no more to say to you. Buried at the bottom, the toy turns the entire box into a slow quest, a treasure that reveals itself only when the last flake is gone. The cereal is the moat, and you will drain the moat spoon by spoon, morning after morning, because there is a knight down there and he is yours once you finish. The box itself is a small cardboard billboard aimed directly at your face, and it never stops selling to you even while you eat. The front has the mascot, mid-leap, delighted. The back has a maze, a puzzle, a comic, a game printed right there so that breakfast becomes a thing you play rather than a thing you eat. Every glance at the box is another minute of advertising you cheerfully volunteer for. You are asking to read the marketing out loud and complaining when your sister turns the box toward herself. And then there is the back panel offer, the one with the coupon and the tiny drawing of something magnificent, a decoder ring or a glow-in-the-dark model or a club you can join, yours for 2 box tops and a small pile of coins mailed to a faraway address. It turns breakfast into an ongoing relationship, a small standing transaction between an 8-year-old and a corporation conducted through the mail, requiring you to eat more boxes to collect more tops. You are not a child eating cereal. You are a customer with a subscription you negotiated yourself. The flakes, meanwhile, are built to keep you coming back to the moat with enthusiasm, sweetened to a degree that would alarm your mother if she read the side panel, which she is too tired at 7 a.m. to do. Some of these boxes are, by weight, closer to candy than to grain, a fact hidden behind the cheerful mascot and the promise of a prize. You taste sugar and milk and the specific thrill of a bowl you actually want to finish, which is the very thrill the recipe was built to produce. Your mother watches the cereal spill across the table and makes the sound mothers make, and she is right, and it does not matter, because you and the box have an understanding she was not invited to join. She bought the box because you wanted it, and you wanted it because a tiger told you to on Saturday, and now you are excavating it because a toy is hidden at the bottom. Every link in that chain was forged in an office by someone who understood you better than you understand yourself. You are 8. You never had a chance, and you are having a wonderful time. At last your fingers close on the little wrapped prize, and you pull it up out of the flakes in triumph, sticky with sugar dust. It is smaller and cheaper than the drawing promised, and you love it completely anyway. The box, now empty, has done everything it was designed to do. It sold you breakfast, held your attention hostage over a maze, signed you up for a mail-order relationship, and taught you, before you could spell the word, that joy comes buried at the bottom of something you have to keep buying. You are 8. The digging has only begun. You are a school cafeteria worker holding a memo that you have now read 3 times, because it appears to be telling you that the smear of ketchup on a lunch tray can officially count as a serving of vegetables. The federal budget is tight, the rules have been loosened, and somewhere a decision was made that a tomato-based condiment is close enough to a tomato. You look at the tray, you look at the memo. A child's vegetable is now whatever the memo says, and it fits in a squeeze packet. The year is 1981, and the proposal came down from the Department of Agriculture as part of a plan to spend less money feeding school children. The lunch program has rules about what makes a complete meal, and those rules cost money to satisfy, because real vegetables are expensive and perishable, and prone to being thrown away by a 9-year-old who wanted the tater tots. So the department went looking for savings, and the savings it found were mostly a matter of redefinition. Do not buy fewer vegetables. Simply widen the definition of a vegetable until the cheap things you already have qualify. And so the memo in your hands performs a small act of culinary alchemy. Ketchup, which is mostly tomato, sugar and vinegar, gets nudged across the line and is, on the paperwork, not legally a condiment, but a vegetable. Pickle relish, similarly, gets a promotion. On paper, a tray with a hot dog and a packet of ketchup now contains a serving of vegetables, and the budget balances. The rules are technically satisfied, and no actual vegetable was harmed or purchased in the process. It is a beautiful piece of accounting. It is also, when you look at the tray, plainly absurd. The country agreed that it was absurd, loudly and immediately. The proposal became a national joke almost overnight, boiled down to 4 devastating words: ketchup is a vegetable, that everyone could understand and nobody could defend. A senator stood up and held an actual bottle of ketchup aloft to mock the whole idea, brandishing a condiment on the floor of the Congress like a piece of evidence at a trial. The image did what no policy paper could. It made the thing look as ridiculous as it was, and the ridicule spread faster than any rebuttal. The backlash was so swift and so merciless that the department retreated within weeks, yanking the proposal and insisting it had all been a misunderstanding. The vegetable definition went back to normal. The ketchup returned to being a condiment. And the whole episode entered the national memory not as a footnote in budget policy but as a permanent punchline. The year the government tried to feed children a squeeze packet and call it a salad. It was withdrawn, but it was never forgotten, because the country had glimpsed how loose the rules could get when the goal was to spend less. What the episode revealed, underneath the laughter, was uncomfortable. The standards protecting what a child eats at school turned out to be soft, negotiable, a matter of definitions that could be stretched when the budget demanded it. If ketchup could nearly become a vegetable in one lean year, then the line between food and its cheapest imitation was not a wall but a curtain, and the curtain could be moved. The proposal failed, but it proved the curtain existed, and everyone who sold cheap food to schools took note. You fold the memo and set it aside, because in the end you will not have to reclassify the ketchup. The outrage saw to that. But you stand in the cafeteria a moment longer, looking at the trays going by, the hot dogs and the tots and the little red packets. You think about how close it came, how a squeeze of condiment nearly became a vegetable by decree. The children file past with their trays, indifferent, hungry, unaware that their lunch was briefly the subject of a national argument. You hand out the ketchup as a condiment, the way you always have. This year, at least, it stayed one. You are peeling a thin sheet of something off a piece of plastic backing and rolling it up for your child, who calls it fruit, because the box calls it fruit, because the word fruit appears on the box in a friendly font. It is sticky. It is the colour of a traffic cone. It leaves a faint chemical sweetness on your fingers and a printed pattern on the plastic where it used to be. You know it is mostly sugar. You pack it anyway, because it is quiet, it does not bruise, and it makes your child happy at 7 a.m. The thing is called a fruit roll-up. General Mills sent it across the country in 1983, and its entire existence is a small argument about the meaning of the word fruit. Technically, somewhere in its ancestry, there was fruit, a distant ancestor of pear or apple concentrate that was cooked down, sweetened heavily, dyed brightly, and pressed into a sheet thin enough to see light through. By the time it reaches your kitchen, it has about as much in common with an apple as a stained glass window has with a beach. But the word survives the journey, and the word is what you are buying. The genius of it is how perfectly it solves your problems while creating your child's. An actual apple is a disaster in a lunchbox. It bruises, it browns, it gets a single bite taken out of it and comes home in the afternoon, dented and rejected, having wasted its whole day. The roll-up bruises never. It survives being sat on. It comes in a shade of red so bright, flat, and unnatural no orchard could produce it, and a texture that no tree has ever grown. Your child adores it precisely because it is nothing like fruit, while you get to pack it believing it is nearly fruit. And the sheet does one more thing, a small piece of theatre printed right into it. On many of these, a pattern is stamped onto the candy, a design that transfers onto your tongue if you press the roll up to your mouth, so that eating it becomes a trick, a game, a thing to show your friends. Your child does not want a snack. Your child wants to stick a picture to their own tongue, and the product understood this desire and built itself around it. It is competing with toys, and it is winning, because it is a toy you are allowed to eat. What holds the whole illusion together is the sugar, which is most of what is actually in your hand. Strip away the shape and the colour and the printed pattern, and what remains is a concentrated sweetness, calibrated to hit a child's palate right where it lives, dialed to the same peak of liking that governs every other product in this story. The friendly font on the box does the rest, borrowing the good reputation of real fruit and draping it over a sheet of candy, so that your genuine wish to feed your child something wholesome gets quietly redirected into buying a dessert. A new category has been born here, and it will not stop at roll-ups. The word fruit will be stretched across all of it, load-bearing, doing the work that the ingredients cannot, and parents everywhere will keep packing it, because the alternative bruises, and this does not. The confusion is not a bug in the marketing. The confusion is the entire product. So you roll the sticky sheet, tuck it into the lunchbox beside the yellow tray, and send your child off believing they are carrying fruit, which they are, in the technical, legal, deeply strained sense that the box intends. It will be eaten at noon in about 4 seconds, tongue tattooed, fingers sticky, and pronounced delicious. Somewhere, an actual apple sits in the bowl on your counter, unbruised because untouched, waiting for a child who will always, given the choice, pick the traffic cone. You cannot really blame the child. The traffic cone was built to win, and the apple was just being an apple. You are trying to insert a very small straw into a very small hole on a foil pouch, and the pouch is not cooperating. The straw bends. You aim for the marked circle and hit the side instead, and a thin arc of sweet drink escapes across the counter. Your child watches this daily struggle with total confidence that you will succeed, because you always do, eventually. The pouch was designed for small hands and yet defeats adult ones constantly. None of this is an accident of the pouch, and the pouch is quietly winning. The pouch is called Capri Sun. It arrived in America in 1981 from Germany, and the packaging is the entire personality of the thing. It is not a can. It is not a box. It is a soft, silver, and faintly alien pouch that flops in the hand and sweats in the sun, sealed like a small ration pack for an expedition, and it looks like nothing else in the lunchbox. That strangeness is the point. In an aisle of identical juice boxes standing at cheerful attention, the pouch lounges, different, memorable, the drink that looks like it came from the future. The straw is the pouch's great collaborator and its great betrayal. It comes glued to the side in its own little wrapper, and you must free it, aim it, and drive it through a tiny pre-marked dot with exactly the right force. Too soft and it crumples. Too hard, and it punches straight through the back of the pouch and out the other side, and now you are holding a foil sprinkler. There is a brief, absurd violence to opening a children's drink. A small daily duel between an adult and a bag, and the bag wins more often than anyone will admit. You have soaked more than one counter. You will soak more. But once the straw is in, the design reveals its cleverness, because the pouch is soft, and a soft container invites squeezing, and squeezing sends the drink up the straw faster than any child intended. A rigid box rations itself. The pouch does not. A distracted 7-year-old grips it in excitement and fires half the contents into their own mouth in one startled gulp. The drink is gone in seconds, sweet and cold, and finished before anyone thought to slow down. The container does not just hold the sugar, it helps deliver it faster. And the drink inside, for all the theatre of the pouch, is the same story as everything else in this lunchbox. A sweetened concentrate matched to a child's exact preference, wearing the bright suggestion of fruit without the burden of much of it. The pouch is the star. It is what your child asked for by name, pointing at the silver one, the special one, the one shaped like a discovery. The liquid is just the reason the pouch is allowed to exist, the cargo that justifies the vehicle, and the vehicle is what got remembered. The pouch did not win a taste test. The pouch won a look test, a hold test, a which one is different test, and those are the tests a lunchbox actually runs. You could pour a superior drink into a boring box and your child would still point at the silver one, every time. So you finally land the straw in the hole, on the third try, with the small triumph of a person who has defeated a bag. You hand it over, and your child squeezes it with joy and drains it in a minute flat. The empty pouch collapses into a flat silver wafer, weighing nothing, and it will sit crumpled in the lunchbox all day like a spent shell. You will do this again tomorrow, and the straw will bend again, and you will soak the counter again, and your child will love the silver pouch again, exactly as designed. The bag, once more, has won. You are handed a juice box by a child who wants it for reasons that have nothing to do with juice. The drink is a bright, radioactive green, and it exists because a cartoon your child loves has a character roughly that colour, and someone realised the two could be sold as a single unit. Your child does not want a beverage. Your child wants to drink the cartoon. You put it in the lunchbox and try not to think about the colour, which is not a colour that occurs in any actual fruit. The drink is Ecto-Cooler. High C released it in 1987, and it is tied to a wildly popular cartoon about ghost hunters, specifically to a small green ghost with a large appetite. The connection is not subtle, and it is not meant to be. The drink is the ghost. It is the ghost's colour. It carries the ghost's name in spirit, and the ghost grins from the box, so that buying the drink and loving the show become the same act. Your child is not choosing a flavour. Your child is choosing a character, and the flavour came along for the ride, green, sweet, and pointless. This is licensing, and it is one of the decade's favourite tricks, the practice of renting a beloved character and stapling it onto a product to borrow all the affection the character has already earned. The show did the hard work of making your child love the ghost. The drink simply arrives afterward and collects, wearing the ghost's face, so that a child who would ignore a plain green juice will beg for this one, because this one is a friend. You are not up against a beverage company. You are up against a cartoon your child watches every single afternoon. The colour itself is a small act of defiance against nature, a green so vivid it seems to glow, a green that announces immediately that no orchard was involved. And that is fine by everyone, because the drink is not pretending to be wholesome so much as it is pretending to be fun, to be the ghost, to be a small, edible piece of the show. A muted, natural colour would ruin it. The whole appeal is that it looks like something a scientist mixed in a cartoon laboratory, and children do not want to drink an apple. They want to drink an adventure, and the adventure is green. What makes the tie-in so powerful is the loop it closes. The cartoon sells the juice, and the juice advertises the cartoon, around and around, a small perpetual motion machine of wanting, powered entirely by a child's affection for a green ghost. Nobody has to keep paying for the advertising. The child does the advertising, to themselves, for free. And underneath the ghost and the colour and the grinning box, the drink is the same sweetened water as all its neighbours, pitched to the same childhood palate, carrying the faint suggestion of fruit and the certain fact of sugar. The character is doing every bit of the selling. Peel the ghost off the box and you have an unremarkable green juice that no child would cross the room for. Leave the ghost on, and you have the most wanted drink in the lunchroom, coveted, traded, drained with reverence. The difference between those two products is not the liquid, it is the license. So you pack the radioactive green drink beside the fruit that is not fruit and the tray that assembles itself. You send your child off with a lunchbox that is, you are slowly realizing, less a meal than a small collection of cartoons and characters that happen to be edible. Your child will drink the ghost at noon and think of the show, and want to watch the show, and see the drink, and want the drink, the loop turning all day. You did not buy a juice. You bought a subscription to a ghost, and the ghost, like the tiger and the mascot before it, is very good at its job. You are pulling a frozen pudding on a stick out of the freezer, and you feel almost virtuous about it, which is exactly the feeling you were sold. A famous, trustworthy, sweater-wearing television father recommends these, and his warmth has transferred somehow to the product, so that handing one to your child feels less like dessert and more like good parenting. It is pudding. It is frozen. It is sugar on a stick. But it arrives wrapped in a reassurance, and the reassurance is doing most of the work. The product is a Jell-O pudding pop, made by General Foods, and it is a small triumph of borrowed trust. The pudding itself is nothing new, sweetened, creamy, familiar. What is new is the face attached to it. A beloved television father whose entire public persona is warmth, reliability, and gentle good sense. The kind of man you would let babysit your children. When he holds up the pop and smiles, something invisible transfers from him to it. His trustworthiness leaks onto the dessert, and suddenly the sugar on a stick feels supervised, approved, safe. This is the celebrity endorsement working exactly as designed, and the design is older than television but rarely this smooth. The company is not really paying the famous father to describe the pudding. Descriptions do not sell pudding. The company is renting his reputation, the decades of affection the public has built up for him, and pouring that affection into a freezer case. You don't buy the pop for its ingredients. You buy it because he is holding it, and you like him, and liking him and buying it have become the same reflex. And the format helps the illusion enormously, because a pop on a stick reads as innocent in a way a slab of cake never could. It is small. It is portioned. It comes one to a wrapper, a single tidy unit, which makes it feel measured and reasonable, a treat with built-in restraint. A whole pie demands a decision. A pop feels like a nothing, a little frozen kindness, and you can hand your child a nothing without the guilt that a real dessert would summon. The stick itself is a tiny alibi, but peel back the friendly father and the tidy stick and the small wrapper, and what remains is dessert, sweetened to the same reliable peak as everything else in this story, offering roughly what any other frozen sweet offers. It is not poison. It is not even unusually bad. It is simply a treat that has been dressed, very skillfully, as something a little more responsible than a treat, so that a parent trying to make good choices can be gently steered into buying it and feel proud rather than indulgent. The pop is fine. It is the halo around the pop that is the product. What the company understood is that parents in this decade are tired and busy and anxious about doing right by their children, and that anxiety is a lever. Attach a trusted face to a treat, and you convert a parent's guilt into a purchase. You let them buy dessert while feeling like they resisted it. The famous father is not selling flavor. He is selling permission, the small relief of being told, by someone you trust, that this particular indulgence is the acceptable kind. Permission, it turns out, is worth far more than flavor, and it costs the company only an endorsement fee. So you hand your child the frozen pop and watch them eat it with total delight, and you feel the warm, faintly false glow of having done a nice thing well, which is precisely the glow you paid for. The stick will be licked clean and dropped somewhere you will find it later, stuck to the floor. Your child got dessert, you got permission. And a beloved man in a sweater got a fee for lending you his good name, which he lent to a great many products, most of them sweeter than they looked, all of them warmer for having been near him. You are 15 years old and you have discovered a soda that treats its own excess as the entire selling point. The slogan does not apologize, it brags. It promises you all the sugar and twice the caffeine, as if those were features a growing teenager had been requesting. You buy it precisely because the adults in your life would not approve, which the company understood before you did. You crack it open in the parking lot feeling rebellious, unaware that your rebellion was market-tested and stocked on the shelf ahead of you. The drink is Jolt Cola. It appeared in 1985, and its marketing is a small work of genius because it says out loud what every other soda tries to hide. All the sugar and twice the caffeine, where the big brands cloak their excess in images of beaches and friendship and gentle refreshment, Jolt strides in and names the excess proudly, hands it to you like a dare. It is not selling a beverage. It is selling defiance in a can, the thrill of a drink your mother would confiscate, and to a 15-year-old, that thrill is worth more than any flavor. The company has read you perfectly, which is the uncomfortable part. It knows that at 15, the surest way to make you want a thing is to make it look like something adults would forbid, that disapproval is not a deterrent but an advertisement. So it built a drink around your rebellion, designed to feel transgressive, positioned as the anti-soda for the kid who has decided the regular sodas are for children. You think you are rejecting what you are handed. You are choosing another thing you were handed, one aisle over, placed there for this exact mood. And the twist that makes it work is that your defiance costs the company nothing and earns it everything. A teenager who buys a product to annoy the adults is still buying the product. Your rebellion does not threaten the machine, it feeds it. The very feeling of striking out on your own, of choosing the loud aggressive can over the wholesome one, has been anticipated, packaged, and priced, so that even your independence flows back into a cash register. You wanted to escape the marketing. You escaped into a different, cleverer piece of marketing that was waiting for you. The drink itself delivers on its blunt promise, a hard jolt of sugar and caffeine that hits a growing body like a small weather event, and that too is the point. It is supposed to feel like too much, because too much is the brand, the whole identity, the reason to reach for it over something calmer. A teenager does not want moderation. A teenager wants intensity, wants to feel something loud, and the company has simply concentrated the loudness and charged admission. The excess is the flavor. What the drink quietly teaches, sip by sip, is that more is better, that the correct amount of sugar and caffeine is as much as a can legally hold. It teaches this to a palate that is still forming, still deciding what normal tastes like. The teenager who drinks the loud can learn to find the ordinary drinks weak, underpowered, boring, and that recalibration follows them upward. The same slow escalation the SALT studies found, now aimed at the whole nervous system. You are not just being sold a soda tonight, you are being tuned. So you drink your rebellious can in the parking lot, feeling like you got away with something, and in a sense you did, and in a larger sense you were right where you were supposed to be, doing just what the shelf predicted. The empty can gets tossed in the back of somebody's car with the others, a small monument to an independence that was manufactured and sold to you at a markup. You feel older, edgier, uncontained. You are 15, and a company 3 states away decided months ago precisely how your rebellion would taste, and then bottled it, and it tastes like all the sugar and twice the caffeine. You are on the sideline of a youth soccer game handing children brightly coloured drinks that they have been taught to associate with athletes. The drink is sweet. It is the exact hue of no naturally occurring liquid. And it has arrived at this ordinary Saturday game because a sports beverage, once meant for professionals sweating through a hot afternoon, has been quietly repositioned as something a 7-year-old should drink after 20 minutes of gentle jogging. You pour it into little cups. Everyone assumes it is the healthy choice because it is shaped like one. Gatorade came up narrow, and in 1983 the Quaker Oats Company bought it and set about widening it into a national habit. It began life narrowly, a formula built for athletes losing serious amounts of sweat and salt during real exertion, a genuinely useful thing in that specific extreme. But a product with a narrow purpose has a narrow market, and Quaker did not buy it to keep it narrow. It bought it to widen it, to convince everyone, sweating or not, exercising hard or barely at all, that they too needed what the athletes drank. The repositioning is a small marvel of suggestion. The drink wraps itself in the imagery of sport, of professionals, of victory and effort, and the glow of the locker room, and that imagery does the persuading. It does not claim, exactly, that your 7-year-old needs it after a light Saturday scrimmage. It simply stands next to greatness, wears the colours of greatness, and lets you draw the flattering conclusion yourself. Your child jogged for 20 minutes and is barely damp, but the drink whispers athlete, and you pour it. Because who does not want their child to be an athlete? And this is where the health halo does its quietest, most effective work, because the drink is, underneath the imagery, mostly sugar and water and colour. It is closer to soda than to anything an orchard or a spring produced, but it does not read as soda. It reads as recovery, as science, as the responsible thing to hand a tired child, and that misreading is the entire achievement. You would hesitate to hand your 7-year-old a cola on the sideline. You hand them this without a flicker, because this is sports, and sports is healthy, and the drink has borrowed all of that. A coach named Ted, who means well and knows nothing, keeps a cooler of it on the sideline and dispenses it with the confidence of a man following doctor's orders, because everybody does this now, because the drink has become simply what you bring to a game. "Good hustle, everybody," Ted calls. "Grab a drink." He pours the cups. The children gulp them. Nobody at this field chose this. The choice was made in an office in 1983 and delivered to the sideline as common sense. What has actually happened is that a moment which required nothing but water, a mildly tired child on a mild afternoon, has been colonized by a sweetened product filled with a drink the child does not need and would be better without. Water is free, plain and boring, and it sells nothing. The coloured drink is neither, and so it wins the sideline, one game at a time, until an entire generation grows up believing that exercise, however gentle, is properly followed by a cup of sugar. The belief is not an accident. The belief was the product all along. So you hand out the cups and the children drink their sugar in the honest conviction that they are being healthy, and the cooler's empty, and everyone goes home believing a small good thing was done. The bright empty bottles collect in the trash bag by the bench, another Saturday's worth, and next week there will be more, because this is simply how games end now. You poured the drink because everyone pours the drink, and everyone pours the drink because a company decided, decades before this game, that the sideline was a market. It was right. You are standing in it. You are reaching for a silver can that promises to give you everything you want and charge you nothing for it. No sugar, no calories, just sweetness, delivered by a laboratory ingredient with a cheerful trademark name, so you can drink all day and step on the scale with a clear conscience. You believe you have outsmarted the system. What you have actually done is keep your tongue trained to expect intense sweetness in everything, which is precisely the habit the whole industry depends on you keeping. The can is Diet Coke. It launched in 1982, and it became one of the most successful new products the company ever released, rising fast to outsell nearly everything except the original itself. What made it possible was a new sweetener, aspartame, sold under the friendly name NutraSweet, which the regulators approved for dry goods in 1981 and for sodas in 1983. Here at last was intense sweetness with no calories attached, sugar's pleasure without sugar's bill, and the country reached for it with the relief of people who had found a loophole in their own bodies. The promise is genuinely seductive, and on its own terms it even delivers. You can drink the silver can all afternoon and the scale will not punish you for it the way a river of regular cola would. For a person anxious about weight and a decade obsessed with it, this feels like a small miracle, a way to keep the comfort and shed the consequence. You're not wrong that the calories are gone. You are only wrong about what the drink is quietly doing to your expectations. which is the part no label mentions. Because sweetness is not just a pleasure, it is a training. Every intensely sweet thing you drink teaches your palate that this is the normal amount of sweet, resets the baseline a little higher, makes the unsweetened world taste a little more like a disappointment. The diet can, for all its virtue about calories, keeps that lesson running at full volume. Your tongue does not know the sweetness is free. It only knows the sweetness is loud, and it adjusts to loud, and now plain water tastes like nothing, and an apple tastes faint, and only the manufactured things taste right. So the diet drink, cheerful, guiltless, and calorie-free, is in truth one of the sugar machine's most loyal servants. It keeps you sweet-toothed. It keeps you reaching for the intense over the plain, the manufactured over the natural, the trademarked over the ordinary. A person who drinks the silver can all day is not being weaned off sweetness. They are being kept fluent in it, kept craving it, kept unable to enjoy a food that has not been pushed to a peak. A customer like that is the customer the whole industry is built to produce. The genius of it is that it captures the very people trying to leave, the ones who have noticed the sugar and decided to cut back, the health-minded defectors who might otherwise drift toward water and fruit, and the quiet perimeter of the store. Instead of losing them, the industry hands them the diet can, and they stay, still sweet-toothed, still loyal, still inside the machine, now feeling virtuous about it. The escape hatch leads back into the building. You thought you found the exit. You found a room with the same wallpaper and a lower calorie count, so you drink your silver can, pleased with your own discipline, calories nowhere in sight, and you keep your palate calibrated to a sweetness no orchard could ever match, exactly as designed. You haven't beaten the system. You have joined a subtler wing of it, the wing for people who read labels, and you are drinking its flagship product with real satisfaction. The can is genuinely calorie-free. The scale stays quiet, but your tongue, kept loud and impatient, is already reaching for the next silver can before this one has gone warm. You are watching a commercial in which a small, fierce elderly woman glares at a competitor's hamburger, lifts the bun, finds the patty comically tiny, and demands to know where the beef is. Within a week you have heard the phrase repeated at work, on the radio, and eventually by a politician on a debate stage. A hamburger chain has managed to insert 4 words into the national conversation, and you are now, against your will, thinking about their burgers. The advertisement did not describe the food. The advertisement became a catchphrase, and the catchphrase did the selling. The woman is named Clara Peller, the chain is Wendy's, and the commercial aired in January 1984 and detonated across the country in a way almost no advertisement ever does. Peller was small, elderly, and gravel-voiced, the opposite of everything a burger ad was supposed to look like, and that was the point. She peers at a rival's enormous bun, discovers the pitiful little patty hiding inside it, and barks it, "Where's the beef?" with the outrage of a woman personally wronged by a sandwich. It was funny, it was sharp, and it was over in seconds, and the country could not stop repeating it. What happened next is the thing advertisers dream about and almost never achieve. The phrase escaped the commercial entirely and became a piece of ordinary language, a thing people said to each other about anything that seemed insubstantial, a joke you could make about a thin argument or an empty promise or a disappointing meal. It got said on playgrounds and in offices. It got printed on shirts. It even climbed onto a presidential debate stage in 1984, where a candidate used it to mock a rival, 4 words from a burger ad now doing work in a fight over the leadership of the country. And every single time the phrase was repeated, for free, by someone who was not being paid, the chain got advertised again. This is the holy grail, the advertisement that stops being an advertisement and becomes a saying, so that the public carries it around and deploys it and spreads it without the company spending another cent. Peller barked it once, on television, "Where's the beef?" And then the whole nation barked it back, for a year, on the company's behalf. You cannot buy that. You can only, occasionally, if you are very clever and very lucky, start it. Notice what the commercial did not do. It did not tell you the burger was juicy, or fresh, or a good value, or better in any measurable way. It made almost no claim about the food at all. It simply attached a feeling, a sharp little jolt of comedy and outrage, to the brand, and let the feeling ride the phrase into your memory. You learned nothing about the hamburger. You learned a joke, and the joke had a company's name folded inside it, and now you cannot think one, without brushing against the other. This is advertising discovering that it does not need to persuade, only to lodge, that a brand does not have to convince you of anything if it can simply become a permanent resident of your head. The catchphrase is a squatter that pays no rent and never leaves. The commercial did not inform you, it colonized you, cheerfully, in seconds. So you sit in front of your television having just watched a tiny furious woman turn a hamburger chain into a national punchline, and you laugh. You repeat it to someone the next morning, and in repeating it you become, unpaid and unaware, part of the campaign. Clara Peller barked, and the country barked back, and Wendy's sat quietly in the middle of all that noise, selling burgers it never had to describe. The food was beside the point. The point was the 4 words, and the 4 words are still in your head right now, which means, all these years later, the ad is still working. You came into this store for one thing, milk, and you have noticed that the milk is always as far from the door as it is physically possible to be. You have to walk the entire length of the building to reach it, past every tempting thing the store owns, and then walk all the way back. This is not an accident of plumbing or refrigeration. The one item you actually need sits at the far end of a very long, very deliberate corridor, and that corridor is lined with everything they hope you grab on the way. The logic is simple, direct, and slightly ruthless. Milk is something almost everyone comes in for, a staple you buy again and again, a guaranteed reason to enter. That reliability makes it valuable, not as a product to profit on, but as bait. Put the milk by the door and people would grab it and leave in 30 seconds, having seen nothing. Put it at the very back, and every single milk buyer must first march the whole depth of the store, exposed the entire way to everything the store would rather sell them. The milk is not merchandise. The milk is the hook that drags you past the merchandise. Let's talk about the other essentials. The eggs, the bread, the things you truly need are all scattered to the far corners so that gathering them requires crossing the maximum possible floor. Your shopping list, the honest little list of things you actually intend to buy, has been used against you. Its items placed as far apart as possible so that connecting them draws a long looping line through territory the store controls. You think you are running errands. You are being routed, gently, through a course someone designed. The perimeter, where the real food lives, is the road you are forced to walk, but the store's true hopes lie in the aisles you pass, the interior shelves stacked with the amplified, the packaged, the profitable. Those products cannot count on being needed, so they count on being seen, and the store guarantees they are seen by making you walk past them to reach the milk. Every trip for a single staple becomes a forced march past 100 things you did not come for, and a few of them, reliably, defect into your cart like tiny stowaways. A store manager named Frank walks the floor each morning checking that everything sits where the plan says it should. The staples banished to the back, the impulse goods massed along the route, the whole layout arranged to keep you moving and looking. Frank did not invent the plan. The plan came down from above him, refined over decades across thousands of stores, tested against millions of shoppers, until the optimal cruelty of the milk's position was known to the foot. Frank just makes sure the milk stays exiled where the data wants it, and it does, every morning, all the way in the back. Nobody stops you, nobody steers your cart. You are free, at every step, to march straight to the milk and straight back out, buying nothing else. And you almost never do. Because the walk is long and the shelves are full and the human eye cannot pass 1,000 tempting things without a few of them catching, the store does not force you. It simply arranges the world so that your own drifting attention does the selling, and your attention, tired and surrounded, obliges. So you finally reach the milk, all the way in the back, and you pick it up. You turn around to face the entire length of the store you must now recross to escape, a second pass through the same gauntlet. You will not make it out with only milk. You never do. You will arrive at the register with the milk you came for and 3 or 4 things you did not, each one grabbed in passing, each one placed exactly where a passing hand would find it. You came in for one thing. The corridor came for everything else, and the corridor usually gets it. You are crouching at the very bottom of the aisle, knees protesting, trying to find the plain, cheaper version of the thing you came for, because it is never at eye level. Eye level costs money. The brands that can afford to pay the store for the good shelf get the good shelf, and everything else is exiled to the floor or the top, where you have to work to find it. You did not know the shelf had rent. You simply assumed the arrangement was natural. It was invoiced. The rent is real and it has a name, the slotting fee, a payment a manufacturer makes to the store simply to have its product stocked, and stocked well. The shelf, it turns out, is not a neutral place where all foods wait to be judged on merit. It is prime real estate, priced by the square inch like beachfront, and the most valuable plot on the whole shelf is the sunny strip right at the height of an adult's gaze. That strip is where hands reach without bending, where eyes land without searching, and it goes to whoever pays the most to stand there. So the arrangement you have always taken for granted, the confident brands at eye level and the cheaper ones banished up high or down low, is not the store honestly showing you your options. It is a map of who paid what. The product at your eye level is not there because it is better. It is there because its maker is large enough and rich enough to buy the best seat in the house, and to keep the smaller, cheaper, often perfectly good competitor down at your ankles where you have to kneel to consider it. The giant brands, already famous, already advertised on every cartoon and every catchphrase, can afford to buy the eye-level shelf on top of everything else. So their products meet you at the easiest possible height while the challenger's product hides near the floor. The rich get the good shelf, and the good shelf makes them richer, and the smaller maker who might have offered you a cheaper, plainer, and less engineered option is literally beneath your notice, placed there on purpose. Let's talk about the store's cut. The slotting fees are pure profit, money collected before a single item is even sold. A sales representative named Diane, in a blazer, sits across a desk from the store's buyer once a season and negotiates how many inches of eye level her company will lease, sliding a figure across the desk the way you might bid on a house. "We'll take the eye level," Diane says, tapping the map. All 4 feet. She is not selling the beans on their merits. She is buying their view, and the view is the height of your eyes, and she pays cash for it before a single can is stacked. The shelf, in that meeting, is openly what it always secretly was, a ledger. Every position a line item, every golden slot a lease. What this means for you, kneeling on the floor, is that finding the honest option now requires effort, and effort is the very thing the system is built to discourage. The plain alternative demands a search, a crouch, a bend, a moment of looking, and a tired shopper at the end of a long trip does not want to search, crouch, bend, or look. So the tired shopper takes what is easy, which is what was paid to be easy, and the fee pays for itself. So you finally spot the cheaper version down by your shoes, retrieve it with a small grunt, and stand back up feeling absurdly triumphant about a can of store-brand beans. You had to work for it, which was the whole idea, and most people, most days, will not do the work, which was also the whole idea. The eye-level shelf gleams at its perfect height, occupied by whoever paid, and you understand now that it was never a display. It was a billboard you were renting to a company by the inch every time you failed to look down. You are eating chips that taste correctly salty, and it does not occur to you that correctly is a moving target. A few years ago, this level of salt would have seemed like a lot. Now it seems like the baseline, and anything less tastes like a mistake, like the factory forgot a step. Your tongue has been slowly recalibrated, one bag at a time, to expect more, and the expectation only ever climbs. A psychologist proved, in a laboratory, that this craving could be trained upward, and then trained it. The comforting story you have always been told is that your taste is simply yours, a fixed fact about you, like your height, something you were born with and cannot help. The uncomfortable truth the researchers found is that taste is a set point, and a set point can be moved. Feed a person steadily more salt over weeks and their sense of the right amount drifts up to meet it, so that the level that once tasted like plenty comes to taste like too little. Your palate is not a fixed judge. It is a thermostat, and someone else has been quietly turning the dial. The same is true of sweetness, and of richness, and of the whole loud vocabulary of manufactured food. Every heavily seasoned thing you eat nudges the baseline a fraction higher, teaches your mouth that this is normal now, resets the floor beneath which everything tastes flat, bland, and wrong. It is a ratchet, and it only turns one way. You never notice it happening, because each individual bag moves the dial too little to feel, and only over years do you look up and realize that the food that thrilled you as a child now tastes faint, and you cannot go back. The proof of it sits at your own kitchen table, in the form of your grandmother, who tastes the dinner you have made from perfectly ordinary modern ingredients and quietly reaches for nothing, because to her it is already too salty, jarringly so, a plate that makes her wince. She grew up before the dial was turned, on food seasoned by a hand rather than a factory, and her set point stayed where it started, approximately 40 years behind the rest of the world. Yours did not. The gap between her wince and your satisfaction is the exact distance the industry has moved you, made visible across one dinner table, measured in a single disapproving bite. And here is the part that turns a quirk of biology into a business model. A palate trained to want more is a customer who buys more, who finds the lightly seasoned competitor disappointing, who reaches always for the loudest product on the shelf, who cannot be satisfied by anything the factory has not amplified. The escalation is not a side effect the companies regret. It is an asset they cultivate, because every notch the dial turns is another notch of dependence, another degree by which the plain and the wholesome become, to your reworked tongue, simply not enough. So the recalibration runs silently underneath everything else in this story, beneath the mascots and the pouches and the giant cups, the slow, patient turning of your own set point until the factory food is the only food that tastes like food. You did not choose this baseline. It was moved, gently, over years, by people who understood that a craving is not fixed but teachable, and who taught yours to want exactly what they had to sell. The thermostat reads normal to you. It only reads that way because someone kept nudging it while you were eating. So you finish the correctly salty chips, satisfied, unaware that correct is a number that has been drifting upward your whole life and is still drifting now. Your grandmother would find them inedible. Your grandchildren, if the dial keeps turning, will find them bland. The chips taste right. You reach for another, and somewhere the dial turns one more quiet click while you chew. You are eating something rich and you are enjoying a sensation you could not name if asked. A smoothness, a coating, a weight that the tongue registers as pleasure before you have even tasted a flavor. This is not an accident of the recipe. Somewhere, a food scientist measured this exact feeling, gave it a plain technical name, and then spent years learning how to reproduce it reliably in a cracker. You think you are enjoying a snack. You are experiencing the successful outcome of a research program aimed directly at your mouth. The sensation has a name in the trade, and the name is mouthfeel, and it is one of the most studied and least discussed properties in all of processed food. Mouthfeel is not taste. It is the physical experience of a food against the tongue and the palate, the creaminess, the crispness, the way a thing yields or resists or melts or coats. And it turns out that a great deal of the pleasure you get from rich food comes not from its flavor at all, but from this tactile dimension, the plush, heavy feeling of fat-bradding across the mouth, registered as luxury before a single taste bud reports in. Fat is the great engine of mouthfeel, which is why the companies fought so hard to fake it when the decade decided fat was the enemy. A food scientist named Gregory spent years of his career on exactly this problem, sitting at a bench, tasting spoonful after spoonful of a formula, adjusting it a hair at a time, chasing the precise sensation of richness that a spoonful of cream gives and that a low-fat product loses. That was the whole assignment, to bottle a feeling. And the tools for it were genuinely scientific, not guesswork. There were machines that measured the force it took to bite through a cracker, instruments that timed how fast a coating dissolved, panels of trained tasters who rated a food on dozens of tactile attributes with the rigor of wine judges. The mouthfeel was not left to chance or to a cook's instinct. It was quantified, charted, and engineered, treated as a set of numbers to be optimized, because the companies had learned that getting the feel right mattered as much as getting the flavor right, and sometimes more. What makes this the quietest trick in the whole story is that you have no defenses against it, because you do not even know it is happening. You can taste sweetness and think, that is very sweet. You can taste salt and notice the salt. But mouthfeel operates below the level of your awareness, a pleasure you register without being able to name, which means you cannot argue with it, cannot resist it, cannot even identify what is pulling at you. The richness works on you silently, and silence is the perfect place from which to persuade. So the factory food reaches you on two channels at once, the loud one you notice and the quiet one you do not. The flavor announces itself and does its work in the open. The mouthfeel slips in underneath, delivering a plush, coating, satisfying sensation that your body reads as richness and reward, and that keeps you reaching without ever telling you why. Gregory, at his bench, was not really building a flavor. He was building a feeling, a specific luxurious weight on the tongue, and a feeling you cannot name is a feeling you cannot refuse. So you finish the rich thing, contented, and if someone asked you why you liked it, you would say it tasted good, which is not quite true or not the whole truth. It felt good in your mouth in a way you were never equipped to notice, built there on purpose by a man with instruments and a bench and a multi-year assignment to reproduce the exact sensation of cream. You enjoyed a snack. You also, without knowing it, completed the field test of a research program, and the program passed because you reach for another one. You are eating something that is salty and sweet and rich all at once, and you cannot stop, and you assume the fault is yours. It is not entirely yours. Those three sensations, delivered together in the right proportions, do something to the appetite that none of them can do alone, overriding the quiet internal voice that would normally tell you that you have had enough. The combination was not stumbled upon. It was pursued, tested, and dialed in, because a food you cannot stop eating is, from a certain office, the entire goal. Think of the actual thing on the plate, a slice of pepperoni pizza, say, or a glazed donut, or a spoonful of a certain frosting. Each one carries all three at once: salt in the crust and the meat, sugar in the sauce and the glaze, fat in the cheese and the oil and the cream. Alone, any one of them has a natural ceiling, a point where too much salt turns harsh or too much sugar turns sickly and your body pushes the plate away. But braided together, in the right balance, they cover for each other, each one softening the other's edges so the ceiling never arrives. The food scientists have a word for what results, and the word is hyperpalatable, which is a clinical way of saying a food so pleasurable it defeats your own restraint. A hyperpalatable food does not merely taste good. It reaches past the part of your brain that decides when to stop and quietly disables it, so that fullness, which should arrive and end the meal, keeps getting postponed. You are not eating until you are satisfied. You are eating until the plate is empty, because the plate was built so that satisfied never quite comes. And the balance is exact, tuned in laboratories with the same care as the bliss point that governs a single ingredient. Except here, three curves are being optimized at once, three dials turned in concert until the food hits the precise combination that your appetite cannot regulate. Too much of any one breaks the spell and the ceiling returns. Get all three right, though, and you have built something a person will keep eating past hunger, past comfort, past the moment their own body tried to tap them on the shoulder. The proportion is the product. This is why so few of these foods are simply sweet or simply salty. The candy bar has salt in it, the chip has a whisper of sugar, the pizza has all three roaring at once. The companies learned long ago that the real magic is never in one sensation but in the chord, the three notes struck together. They have spent the whole decade learning to strike that chord more precisely, in more products aimed at more moments of your day. The single note was the old way. The chord is what keeps your hand moving. What makes it feel like a personal failing is that the override happens silently, below the argument you are having with yourself. You tell yourself, one more and I will stop, and you mean it, and then your hand moves again, because the food has switched off the mechanism that would have made stopping feel natural. This is not weak will. You are outmatched, going up against a chord engineered specifically to beat the exact stopping signal your body was born with. The chord wins because it was designed by people who studied the signal in order to defeat it. So you finish the salty, sweet, rich thing and feel a low bafflement at yourself, the same bafflement as the empty chip bag and the drained cup, the sense of having eaten past a line you meant to hold. The line was real. It simply had help getting crossed. From three sensations braided together by someone who knew exactly what the braid would do. You reach for the last bite, the one you swore you would leave, and you eat that too. The chord was struck correctly. Your appetite never had a chance to file its report. You are lighting a cigarette after dinner, a dinner that came largely from boxes, and you do not know that the company printed on your cigarette pack now also owns most of what was on your plate. Across a few short years, the makers of the most famous cigarettes in America quietly bought the makers of your gelatin dessert, your coffee, your macaroni, and your children's drink mix. The same corporate minds that studied how to make one product hard to put down have turned their attention and their methods to the pantry. The buying happened fast and enormous. The maker of Marlboro bought General Foods in 1985 and then bought Kraft in 1988, spending sums with more zeros than a person can picture. folding the two great larders of American convenience food into a company built on cigarettes. At nearly the same time, the other tobacco giant merged with Nabisco, the maker of the cookies in your cupboard. When the smoke cleared, an astonishing share of what filled your kitchen shelves answered, at the very top, to men who had spent their careers selling tobacco. Let's talk about what those men brought with them, which was not just money but a way of thinking, honed over decades on a very different product. The tobacco companies were the acknowledged masters of a specific dark art, the art of understanding just what makes a person reach for a thing again and again, the science of the habit, the study of the craving, the careful tuning of a product so its user keeps coming back. They had instruments for measuring appeal, teams for studying the customer, a whole cathedral of research built around the single question of how to make something very hard to set down. And now they own the Jello. The methods transferred with unsettling ease, because the questions turned out to be the same. How do you make a person want more? How do you find the exact formulation they cannot resist? How do you market to the young so the preference sets early and holds for life? A tobacco company had spent decades answering those questions about cigarettes, and the answers, it turned out, did not much care what product they were pointed at. Aim the same apparatus at a cracker or a drink mix, and it works just as well, because it was never really about the tobacco, it was about the reaching. And there is a bleak elegance to the fit, because food and cigarettes are both things you consume many times a day, both sold in bright packages, both built around a small repeated pleasure. A company that already knew how to own a daily habit did not have to learn a new trade when it bought your groceries. It simply had to apply the trade it already possessed to a shelf full of new products, and it did, quietly, behind familiar brand names that gave no hint of who now sat above them, counting the reaches. You would have no way of knowing any of this from your kitchen. The gelatin dessert still wears its cheerful old box, the coffee still smells like morning, the children's drink mix still grins from its packet. Nothing on any label announces that the ultimate owner also makes the cigarette in your hand, or that the same expertise, the same appetite for understanding your cravings, now stands behind both. The brand stayed friendly, familiar, and unchanged precisely so that the ownership underneath them could stay invisible, and it did. So you finish your cigarette over the remains of your boxed dinner, both products flowing, unknown to you, from the same corporate source, both shaped by the same long study of how to keep a person coming back. The dessert in the refrigerator, the coffee in the cabinet, the drink mix in the pantry, and the pack in your shirt pocket are, at the very top, cousins. You never asked who owned your food. If you had, the answer would have surprised you, and then, once you thought about what those particular owners were good at, it would have stopped surprising you at all. You are reading the newspaper over breakfast, over a bowl of the very cereal in question, and the headline is about your snacks. A company that makes cookies and crackers is being fought over by financiers in numbers so large they stop meaning anything, a sum with more zeros than a grocery bill has ever held. You are eating a cracker that men in distant towers are willing to spend a fortune to control. It occurs to you, dimly, that the humble contents of your cupboard have become the stakes in a very high game. The company is RJR Nabisco, the cookie and cracker and tobacco giant, and in 1988 it became the object of the largest buyout the business world had ever seen. A deal valued around $25 billion. That number is not a price for a factory or a recipe. It is the price of control over the reaching itself, over the daily habits of millions of people who put a certain cracker in the cart without thinking. The financiers were not bidding on cookies. They were bidding on the reliability of your snacking, which turns out to be worth an astronomical sum. The fight was led, on one side, by the company's own chief executive, a flamboyant man named Ross Johnson who lived enormous, flew private, and treated the corporation as a personal kingdom, and on the other by a firm of buyout specialists who smelled how much steady money a cracker company quietly threw off. What followed was a bidding war so lavish and so bare-knuckled that a book was written about it. The book called The Men Involved Barbarians, storming the gate of a company that made, of all things, the cookies in your child's lunch. Let's talk about why. The reason a cracker company was worth $25 billion is that it was a machine for generating dependable cash, and it generated dependable cash because you, and millions like you, could be counted on to keep buying. The whole towering deal rested, at the very bottom, on the humble certainty of your habit, on the near mathematical reliability that next month you would buy the cookies again, and the month after that. Your unthinking reach was the foundation the whole fortune stood on. That is what an addicted market is worth, in plain dollars. When the financiers looked at the company, they did not see a bakery. They saw a faucet, a stream of money as steady and predictable as plumbing, running because the products had been engineered, marketed, and placed so that people bought them by reflex, and they were willing to borrow a mountain to own that stream. The engineering you have watched all night, the bliss points and the mouthfeel and the eye-level shelves, had done its work so thoroughly that it showed up, finally, as a number on a headline, $25 billion, the cash value of a nation's habit. You, at your kitchen table, receive none of that money, of course. You are the source of it, not a shareholder in it. Your reliable purchasing is the asset being fought over, and you will go on buying the crackers no matter which barbarian wins, which is precisely why the crackers were worth fighting over. The deal will be announced and celebrated or condemned, and it will change nothing in your cupboard. The cookies will taste the same. You will buy them again. That sameness is the entire point, and it is what the $25 billion was for. So you fold the newspaper, finish your cereal, and rinse the bowl, having read, without quite absorbing it, that your snacking is a fortune. Somewhere far above you, men are borrowing sums beyond imagining on the strength of the reflex that just made you eat a whole bowl without deciding to. The headline will fade, the bowl will be dirty again tomorrow, and the reach that funds all of it, the small, reliable reach for the sweet, familiar thing, will happen again, right on schedule, just as the numbers promised it would. You are watching your toddler recognize a logo before she can reliably recognize her letters, pointing at the golden shape through the car window and shrieking with joy. This is not random. A great deal of money was spent to put that shape into her before she had defenses against it, because the industry learned that the tastes and loyalties formed at 2 or 3 tend to hold for a lifetime. You are raising a child. A brand is, at the same time, quietly raising a customer, and it started before you did. Your daughter, whose name is Katie and who is 3, cannot read, cannot count past a shaky 10, cannot tie a shoe or button a coat. But she knows the golden arches on sight and the cereal tiger and the grinning clown, and she knows them with a certainty and a joy she does not yet feel for most of her own relatives. Those shapes went into her early and deep, placed there by cartoons and boxes and drive-through toys, and they took root in soil that had no defenses yet, no skepticism, no way to know she was being courted. The industry figured out something that sounds almost too cynical to be true, which is that the youngest child is the most valuable long-term customer of all. A brand that captures a person at 3 does not capture them for a season. It captures them for decades, because the preferences set in early childhood are stubborn, deep, and durable. They feel like part of the self. They get carried forward into every future grocery cart with the weight of comfort and memory. Reach a 3-year-old, and you may have reached a 40-year-old, prepaid, delivered slowly over the intervening years. So the money flows toward the youngest eyes on purpose, into the Saturday cartoons, the cereal aisle at toddler height, the collectible toys, the mascots designed to be lovable. None of it is really aimed at selling one box today. It is aimed at planting a loyalty that will bear fruit for 30 years, a slow investment in a customer too young to consent, too young even to know a transaction is taking place. Katie thinks she loves the tiger. The tiger, or the office behind it, is making a very long bet on Katie. And you cannot fully protect her from it, which is the part that stings, because the shapes reach her everywhere. On the television, in the store, through the car window, on the shirts of other children, in the toys at a friend's house. By the time she is old enough to think critically about a brand, the brand will already live inside her, wearing the warm clothes of childhood, indistinguishable from a happy memory. The defenses she will eventually grow will arrive years after the walls were already breached, useless against an occupant that was let in before there was anyone home to say no. Katie genuinely lights up at the golden shape. Her joy is not fake, not manufactured in her, only aimed and harvested, a true childish delight that happens to have a company's name folded inside it. You watch her point and shriek and you feel the pull of it yourself, the sweetness of her happiness. You understand that the happiness is the mechanism itself, that they are not fighting your child's joy but riding it, all the way to a cash register 30 years from now. So you drive past the golden arches with a shrieking, delighted 3-year-old in the back seat. You feel 2 things at once. the ordinary warmth of her happiness and a colder awareness of what that happiness was cultivated for. Katie will remember this joy without remembering where it came from, and she will carry it forward into her own adult cart, into her own children's lunch boxes, passing the loyalty down without ever knowing it was placed in her. You are raising a daughter. They have been raising a customer alongside you, patiently, since before she could read, and they are ahead. You are standing in the cold breath of the frozen aisle, sliding open a fogged glass door, choosing tonight's dinner from a wall of photographs. One box promises you a lean, elegant, portion-controlled evening. The box beside it promises a hungry man, an enormous, gravy-soaked feast. They are made by companies that understand you will be one person on one night and the other person on another, and they have prepared a box for each of your moods. You reach into the cold and pick the version of yourself you feel like being tonight. The aisle is a long, refrigerated wall, and it is arranged less like a pantry than like a menu of selves. There is the disciplined you, addressed by the small trim box with the calm typeface and the reassuring numbers, the you who made a resolution this morning. There is the surrendered you, addressed by the enormous slab of meat and potatoes, the you who has decided tonight is not the night for resolutions. The companies do not judge between them, they simply stock both, side by side, and let you point at whichever mood arrived with you tonight. And the aisle has grown crowded with more than just dinners, because the freezer turned out to be a doorway into almost every hour of your day. There are little pockets of dough stuffed with hot filling for the afternoon. There are tiny frozen pizzas roughly the size of a coaster for the after-school rush. There are miniature bagels wearing sauce and cheese, and breakfast sandwiches you can eat in the car, and rolls of pizza filling meant to be eaten by the handful. The freezer no longer holds only supper. It holds a version of every meal and every snack, each one flattened, boxed, and frozen solid. What unites this whole cold wall is the promise it makes and the price that promise hides. But holding flavor inside food that must survive frozen for a year or more takes the same tricks as everywhere else in this story. The salt, the sugar, the fat, the long unpronounceable back panel, all working to keep the photograph on the front from being a total lie when the thing finally steams on your plate. The photographs themselves are the true product, and they are gorgeous, lit and styled and arranged with a care the actual contents will never receive. You aren't really choosing food off this wall. You are choosing pictures, each one a small promise of the evening you wish you were having. The frozen brick behind the glass is merely the closest the factory could get to the picture within the constraints of a year in the cold. You know the brick will fall short of the photograph. You reach for the photograph anyway, because on a Tuesday, the promise is enough. And the genius of stocking every mood is that the aisle never loses you. The morning after the feast, when you feel the pull toward discipline, the trim little box is right there waiting. The evening you give up on discipline, the enormous feast is waiting too. Whichever way your resolve swings on a given night, the cold wall has a box positioned for that exact swing, so that no mood, no promise, or lapse ever sends you out of the freezer aisle and towards something you would have had to actually cook. Every version of you has already been anticipated and boxed, so you slide the fog door shut on the cold, your chosen box in hand, whichever self you pick tonight. You carry it to the register knowing it will fall a little short of its photograph and grateful, on this particular evening, that it exists at all. Tomorrow you may reach for the opposite box, the lean one or the enormous one, depending on which resolution or surrender arrives with you. The aisle does not care which. It stocked them both, in the cold, under the beautiful lying photographs, and it will be waiting, frozen solid, for whichever you shows up next. You are noticing, now that you have started to look, that candy has quietly colonized every counter you approach. It is at the pharmacy register. It is at the hardware store. It waits in a glass case at the movie theatre at a price that would embarrass a jeweler. Wherever you must stand and wait, there it is, at hand height, freshly restocked, patient. You are never more than a few feet from something engineered to be bought without a decision. The whole built world has been quietly arranged to keep the impulse close. Once you see it, you cannot stop seeing it. You go to the pharmacy to pick up a prescription, a place concerned with your health, and there by the register is a rack of chocolate bars. You go to the hardware store for a box of nails, and somehow, at the counter, there is candy again. The gas station, the video rental counter, the checkout of the bookstore, all of them have grown a small reef of sweets right where your hand rests while you wait. The candy has learned to live wherever a person pauses, and a person pauses everywhere. The great makers of it, the two chocolate giants who have battled for a century, keep the reef stocked and keep it evolving, adding a new version every year to catch your eye anew. They put peanut butter inside the little candies in 1988, gave the old favourites new fillings and new sizes, kept the rack from ever going stale so that even the familiar counter had something faintly new to snag you. The candy does not sit still and wait to be outgrown. It refreshes itself endlessly, so that your eye always finds one more thing it has not yet tried. The movie theatre is where the whole logic reaches its shameless peak. You have paid to get in, you are trapped in the lobby, the film is about to start, and there behind the glass is candy at a markup so steep it is almost comedy, a box of the same sweets that cost pennies at the pharmacy now priced like a small appliance. A concession worker named Vince scoops popcorn behind the counter and rings up the candy without blinking, because everyone pays it, because you cannot bring your own. Because the theatre makes more from the glass case than from the movie, and everyone in the building quietly knows it. What ties all of these counters together is the single principle that has run beneath this entire night, that the sale is won not by persuasion but by proximity. Nobody at the hardware store is arguing that you need a candy bar. They have simply placed one within reach of your idle, tired and waiting hand, and reach beats reason, especially at the end of an errand, especially when you are tired, especially when the price feels small. The candy does not need to convince you. It needs only to be there, at hand height, at the moment your resolve is elsewhere. And so the built world fills, counter by counter, with these small manufactured temptations until you cannot run an ordinary day's errands without passing a dozen of them, each one placed by someone whose job was to make sure a sweet thing stood right where a bored hand would find it. The impulse is never allowed to get far from you, because a company somewhere understood that the surest way to sell a thing to a distracted person is to keep it always, everywhere, one short reach away. So you leave the pharmacy, or the hardware store, or the theatre with the thing you came for and, more often than you would like to admit, a small sweet thing you did not come for, grabbed in a pause, paid for without a thought. The reef of candy stays behind, restocked before you have reached the door, waiting for the next tired hand. You did not decide to buy it. You were simply near it, again, the way the whole arranged world now guarantees you will always, at every counter, be near it. You are standing on the bathroom scale at the end of the decade, and the number has crept the way it has crept for a lot of people all at once, quietly, over years, without any single meal to blame. Nothing dramatic happened. No one forced anything into your mouth. The food simply got cheaper, sweeter, closer, and harder to refuse, one ordinary evening at a time, and the results are only now becoming visible on a great many scales in a great many bathrooms. The decade is ending, and the bill is just beginning to arrive. You cannot point to the day it happened, because there was no day. There was a big gulp on a Tuesday, and a bag of puffs that vanished on a Thursday, and a drive-through toy, and a frozen dinner. A bowl of cereal read off the back of the box, 10,000 small ordinary moments, none of them a decision, all of them adding up behind your back the way the empty chip bag always did. The scale is simply the ledger finally catching up, tallying a sum that was accumulated a handful of calories at a time, invisibly, over years you thought were unremarkable. And the numbers are not just yours. For decades the country's weight had held roughly steady, flat as a calm sea, and then, right around the start of this decade, the line began to climb. It kept climbing, and it did not stop for a long time. Somewhere in a public health office, a researcher watches that line bend upward and reaches, eventually, for a word that used to be reserved for cigarettes. Because the shape of the curve looks familiar, and the mechanism behind it, the engineered craving, the daily reach, looks familiar too. What is striking, standing on the scale, is that no reckoning arrives to match the size of what happened. The Saturday cartoons keep selling toys to children, until a law finally trims them back in 1990, years after the damage is done. The tobacco companies keep their food businesses quietly for years more. The science of the bliss point and the mouthfeel and the vanishing puff does not get exposed and abandoned. It gets refined, expanded, taught, carried forward into the next decade, and the one after that. Standard practice now, the ordinary way food is made. The people who built the machinery mostly go on with their careers, because none of them were villains, exactly, and that is the uncomfortable part. The man who found the bliss point keeps optimizing products for decades and is eventually written about in a book that pulls back the curtain on all of it. The man who invented the yellow tray rises through his company and, much later, admits to a quiet unease about the world he helped build. They did their jobs, well, inside a system that rewarded one thing only, and the system did not ask them to feel bad, and mostly they did not, and the food kept coming. So there is no grand accounting, no moment where the whole apparatus is called to answer for the creeping number under your feet. There is only the slow arithmetic of it, showing up quietly on scales, in doctors' offices, in the waistbands of pants that used to fit. A bill presented not to the companies that ran it up, but to the millions of ordinary people who simply ate what was cheap and close and built to be hard to stop. The reckoning, if it is coming to the wrong address, and it is in no hurry. You step off the scale and get on with your morning, because there is a lunch to pack and a bowl to rinse and a drive to make, the same ordinary evening waiting at the end of the day, the same cheap, close factory food waiting to fill it. The number will be there tomorrow, and the food will be there tomorrow, and the small, reliable reach will happen again, right on schedule, the way it was built to. Nothing forced this. That was always the cleverest part. Nothing had to. You spent the night in a shopping cart negotiating with a tiger, drinking a soda so large it would not fit in your car, digging a plastic toy out of a box of flakes, and losing a slow war to a bag of orange puffs that vanished before your brain could count them. You met the man who found the exact amount of sugar at which your happiness peaks, the tiny furious woman who demanded to know where the beef was, and the cigarette company that quietly bought your Jell-O. It is easy, from here, to laugh at all of it, and you should. But spare a small thought for the people caught inside it, the tired parent packing the yellow tray at 7 a.m. because it brought back a morning they did not have, the child who loved the green ghost drink with a whole heart, the grandmother who tasted the dinner and quietly found it too salty. None of them did anything wrong. They just lived in a world that had been carefully arranged around their weakest moments, and they got through it the way people always do, one ordinary evening at a time. That is the quiet truth under all the noise. Almost nobody in this story was a villain. There were only people doing their jobs a little too well, and other people, tired and hungry and busy, reaching for the thing that was cheap and close and hard to put down. The reach was small. It just happened a great many times. Thank you for spending this hour with me, for letting a story about spaghetti sauce and vending machines carry you towards sleep. You made it all the way to the end, past the drive-thru and the frozen aisle, and there is nothing left to buy and nowhere left to be. So let the shopping list go, let your hands unclench from the cart. Let your shoulders drop, let the weight of the blanket settle over you, let the day fade, and let your breathing go slow, and even as the room goes quiet around you, there is no aisle to walk tonight, nothing to reach for, nothing to resist. Sleep well.